And now it's time for another Saints timeout. January 25, 1981, Super Bowl 15, as head coach Tom Flores and his 11-5 Oakland Raiders took on Dick Vermeil's 12-4 Philadelphia Eagles before 76,135 fans.
Hello, everyone. Dick Enberg. Welcome to football's answer to the Mardi Gras.
The Eagles seemed to be jinxed from the start as quarterback Ron Jaworski had his first pass intercepted by Raiders linebacker Rod Martin, where Martin went on to intercept 3 passes that day to set a Super Bowl record.
Play action. Jaworski intercepted by Rod Martin. Martin at the 40. He is to the Eagles' 29-yard line. Didn't get it. Intercepted by Martin. He was out of bounds when he intercepted the ball. It will count as a turnover. The same man who picked one off to start the game and led Oakland to its first touchdown has another. Jaworski intercepted. Rod Martin, can you believe it? 3 interceptions today, and the Raiders have it back. If Plunkett's the offensive star, the defensive star is Rod Martin.
Later, an Eagles touchdown pass to wide receiver Rodney Parker was called back on a penalty.
He's buying time and throwing long for Parker. Touchdown! A flag is down. Rodney Parker, a New Orleans native. It appeared Carmichael headed upfield before the snap.
Game solidified the comeback of Raiders quarterback Jim Plunkett, who didn't start until 6 games into the season. He would be named game MVP and threw 3 touchdown passes to seal a 27-10 victory for Oakland.
From the 2, 3rd and goal. Plunkett to throw. Touchdown! Good protection. Throwing for King. Could go all the way. 40, 30. Touchdown, Oakland. Play action. Going for 6 to Branch. Touchdown! He stole it away from Roynell Young.
Another noteworthy point came into the post-game trophy presentation, where many didn't know how Commissioner Pete Rozelle would react to giving his longtime nemesis, Raiders owner Al Davis, the Vince Lombardi Trophy. But the exchange went peacefully.
Al, the Raiders became, of course, the first wild card to win the Super Bowl. I think it's a tremendous compliment to the organization because you had to win 4 postseason games. Today, of course, was the big one, the Super Bowl. I think it's a great credit to you for putting this team together. I think that Tom Flores clearly did one of the great coaching jobs in recent years, all season and particularly today. And it's a credit to some marvelous, dedicated athletes, especially Jim Plunkett and that offensive line today.
All right.
You've earned it. Congratulations.
On January 20th, 1981, General Manager Steve Rosenblum and Dick Steinberg, head of personnel, both resigned from the Saints. 2 days later, O.A. Bum Phillips was named head coach.
New Orleans don't make any bones about it. They want you to win, and they want their team to win. They don't leave any doubt in your mind when you go in there who they're for.
Phillips loved to emphasize running the ball on offense and stopping the run on defense using a 3-4 formation. Bum Phillips' first draft in New Orleans was one of the best in club history. It all started with first-round pick George Rogers.
New Orleans chose me, and I'm sure going to give my best, and that's 100% every time I go out on the field.
Other key selections from that draft included quarterback Dave Wilson, first round of the supplemental draft, plus safety Russell Gary, linebacker Ricky Jackson, defensive end Frank Warren, tight end Hobie Brenner, guard Louis Oubre, cornerback Johnny Poe, linebacker Glenn Redd, fullback Oki Gajan, and defensive tackle Jim Wilkes. Part of the rebuilding process included the releasing of several longtime players, including linebacker Joe Fetterspiel, guard Emmanuel Zanders, defensive tackle Alex Price, and a trade that sent running back Tony Galbraith to the Vikings. The 81 Saints finished 4-12, with George Rogers winning the NFL rushing title of 1,674 yards. Bum Phillips at one point started as many as 6 rookies on defense. The 4 wins included both meetings against the Rams, where George Rogers had a combined 323 yards rushing, and then a win over Cincinnati in the Superdome 17-7. In the contest, linebacker Jim Kovac had an interception and did something very unique after the catch. Here's Bum Phillips.
It really amazed me. I didn't know where in the world he was going. And evidently he had promised one of those kids that wasn't physically able to intercept the ball. Doc had told him, look, the next one I intercept, I'm going to give it to you. I thought it was one of the best things I've ever seen a guy do. The most unselfish things that I've ever seen a guy do.
Probably the win that meant more to Bum Phillips was going back to Houston to face his former team, the Oilers. The Saints walked away with a 27-24 victory, including George Rogers rushing for 142 yards, Jack Holmes with 2 touchdowns, and Kenny Kenny Bordelon with an interception. Some felt the Saints did rather well despite having 47 turnovers in the campaign. One of the more interesting decisions Bum made during the regular season was the trading of Wes Chandler. Some players felt it was because he got into an argument with Bum Phillips on the team plane back from a game at San Francisco over wanting the ball more. Another story claims that at a Saturday morning team barbecue, Wes Chandler was tired and went sit by himself at the practice facility, to which Bum Phillips thought that he didn't want to be a team player. But in essence, it was a triangular trade where Wes Chandler went to San Diego, San Diego sent wide receiver John Jefferson to Green Bay, and Green Bay sent wide receiver Andre Thompson to New Orleans. It was definitely a rebuilding year, but you definitely didn't hear the last of
Big Bad Bum. Big Bum. Big Bum. Big Bum.
Heading into the 1982 campaign, Bum Phillips was also promoted to general manager. On June 10th, Bum traded a number 1 draft choice in '83 to the Green Bay Packers in return for defensive end Bruce Clark. As a result, he then traded longtime Saints veteran defensive end Eloyus Grooms to the St. Louis Cardinals on August 3rd for an undisclosed draft choice. During training camp, quarterback Dave Wilson went down with a knee injury, and in replacing him on August 24th, Bum signed his former Oiler quarterback Kenny Stabler. Stabler would go on to be named starter on opening day of the regular season, and then a few days after that, on September the 17th, Bum decided to trade away longtime fan favorite Archie Manning to the Houston Oilers in return for tackle Leon Gray.
It really hurt me to get traded. I had played that long and had been told I was going to be here. Very much wanted to finish my career here, so I guess it broke my heart more than anything. And I told Bum, I said, I'll forgive you for trading me, but I'll never forgive you for trading me to Houston. Because it was a worse situation over there than it had been here.
Many felt the trading of Manning also had a lot to do with Bum's philosophy of team chemistry, where bringing in players he was familiar with that he knew would get along with one another would lead to a better work ethic and, as a result, potentially more wins. It's estimated in Bum's 5 seasons in New Orleans, he brought in 13 ex-Oiler players. After a 1-1 start, the NFL players' strike canceled games before play resumed on November 21st. November 28th, the Saints upset the 49ers in San Francisco 23-20. Then on December the 5th, the Saints would lose 13-10 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Dome, when on the last play, Morton Anderson tried what seemed to be the impossible.
Here we go. Guido Merkins will hold from the 50-yard line, a 60-yard field goal attempt to send it into overtime. It is up. It is no good. It was off to the right. He had the distance. It would have crossed the bar.
It's easy to forget that Morton Anderson was actually injured during the first regular season game of '82. As a result, Bum brought in kicker Tony Frisch from the Houston Oilers to substitute. Bum decided to keep both kickers on the roster, where Tony would kick the relatively shorter field goals. On December 19th, in a loss to Dallas, Frisch missed 2 field goals in the contest. He was so upset that when the team plane landed in New Orleans, he went straight to his apartment, packed all of his things, and then drove back to Houston and never told Bum Phillips he was quitting. And then the final game of the regular season on January 2nd of 1983 in the Dome against Atlanta, which was a makeup week based on the earlier strike cancellations, Bum Phillips decided to run up the score because Bum felt that Lehman Bennett ran the score up on him a few weeks earlier. In this exciting Saints win, 35-6, the Saints would set a then club record 32 first downs.
Touchdown, Kenny Duckett. Down goes Bartkowski in the grasp of Whitney Paul. We mentioned Ertzleben had a pretty easy afternoon. They've got the fake punt.
Russell, and he's going to throw a pass. He's got it complete to Bill Holding. He's loose at the 30, 25, 20. He's still open. Gets a block at the 15, 10, 5. He's got it. Touchdown! Listen to this crowd. Oh, how sweet it is.
Body to the top of the screen, wide right. Sweep to Wayne Wilson. Touchdown, New Orleans. That's Stacey Bailey, the rookie out of San Jose. Pops it up, and the Saints have got the football. Dennis Winston. They go with a double tight end alignment. Larry Hardy and Rich Body. That's in motion, number 46, Okie Guyjon. Wayne Wilson, touchdown. Big hole on the right side. Stan Brock, 67. Kelvin Clark, 78, opened it up.
Commissioner Pete Rozelle expanded the playoffs as compensation for the strike-shortened year to 8 teams per conference. The Saints at 4-5 with the highest-ranked team not to go to the postseason in the National Conference due to a tiebreaker formula that allowed Detroit to go with the same record. The Saints finished the short season number 1 in total defense, a sign of things to come. The 1983 Saints campaign started on a bit of a downer for some fans. as longtime favorite free safety Tommy Myers was released on August the 3rd. The 1983 Saints finished the season number 1 in total defense in the National Football Conference, which included 56 sacks. The defense's popularity gave them nicknames ranging from Southern Discomfort, the Cajun Crunch, Bourbon Street Bruisers, and Nitty Gritty Dirts Band in relation to linebacker Dirt Winston. Unfortunately, the offense turned the ball over 47 times and eventually resulted in an 8-8 record. George Rogers would rush for over 1,100 yards that year, and Johnny Poe led the team in interceptions with 7. The Saints would start the regular season on September the 4th in a home win over the St. Louis Cardinals 28-17. George Rogers setting a then team record 206 rushing yards. 2 days before the game, WVUE Television's Ken Berthelot and cameraman Avis Landry aired a story about the St. Augustine High School football team. Their cameras caught the team on the bus going to practice stating a very familiar chant. And from that point onward, it became the foundation of all Saints cheers. After a close loss the next week to the Rams at near 100-degree temperatures in Anaheim, the Saints would win their first ever overtime game back in New Orleans against the Chicago Bears.
Spotted at the 31. Merkins holding. Morton Anderson gets it up, and it is good. 34-31.
1 week after that, on September 25th, the Saints would play at the Dallas Cowboys. The Saints would lose 21-20, largely because of quarterback Kenny Stabler being safety. It was the first time in NFL history that a team winning by 1 point in the fourth quarter lost by a point. The Saints defense would score their own touchdown against the Miami Dolphins in the Superdome 1 week later on October 2nd.
Marino hit, picked off, coming back with it, Reggie Lewis. It was Frank Warren who came in, got to Marino, he lost the ball. Reggie Lewis, big number 98, rolled it in there.
Saints go on to win the contest 17-7. 1 week later, on October 9th at the Atlanta Falcons, the Saints would have to come back. It began with a long kickoff return by Kenny Duckett, and from there, Kenny Stabler would slowly drive down the field.
3 seconds remaining. Morton Anderson will have the opportunity to kick one he's always wanted to do. 35-yard field goal attempt. The kick is up. It's high. It's high. It is good. The clock has expired. The Saints have won it. 19-17.
A blowout loss to San Francisco in the Superdome would follow. Then the Saints would squeak out a win at Tampa Bay on October 23rd, thanks in part to defensive back Bobby Johnson running back an interception for a touchdown, and offensive lineman Kelvin Clark recovering a fumble in the end zone for his own touchdown. And then a pivotal game on Monday Night Football, November 21st. The Saints would have an 11-point lead going into the fourth quarter. That lead would slowly erode away, especially thanks to a Kurt Springs punt return for a touchdown. The Saints would try to come back.
19 seconds. It's only third down, a 51-yard attempt. Guido Merkins will put it down. Jim Peterzak will be the snapper. On his way. No. And why on third down? When you got Kenny Stabler, I think you should take the other down. I do too.
Final score, Jets 31, Saints 28. And then yet another exciting contest, November 27th, back and forth. The Saints winning 17-16, ironically, because former Saints kicker Benny Ricardo, then with the Vikings, would miss a late attempt. December 11th at the Philadelphia Eagles. Back and forth contest. Eagles kicker Tony Franklin had a chance to win the game with 18 seconds left in regulation, but pushed the field goal wide right. As a result, the game goes to overtime, and Morton Anderson makes the winning field goal in the extra period from 50 yards out. Final score 2017 Saints. And then comes December 18th, 1983. Needing a win to capture a wild card berth, the Saints would not allow a single offensive touchdown by the Rams. However, the Rams made up for that by scoring 2 touchdowns on interception runbacks, along with a punt return touchdown. Kenny Stabler would also be safetied early on in the game. The Saints offense held their own, but on occasion needed a little good fortune to go their way.
Third down. Rogers. Fumble. Touchdown. Steve Court.
Ken Stabler wound up getting hurt in the contest, and Dave Wilson would have to go the rest of the way. With the Saints up 24-23 and 3.5 minutes left in the game, Bum Phillips decided not to go for a 49-yard field goal. Instead, Guido Merkins, who had to go in as punter when Russell Erkslaven was allegedly hurt earlier in the contest, wound up kicking the ball in the end zone for a touchback. With 1:51 left, the Rams would slowly drive down the field to set up Mike Lansford's 42-yard field goal attempt. Here's the call with Jack Buck and Hank Stram.
High snap, there's the kick. Good!
Is that incredible?
There are no flags, and we have only 2 seconds left. And look at that scene with the Rams. And now look at the other scene.
like a grenade has gone off in the New Orleans quarters as they're all stretched out on the ground. They can't believe what has happened to them.
And here's the other version of that call from Larry Matson.
6 seconds remain. This is it. The snap is high. The snap, the kick is up. It's long. It is good. They're mouthing Lansford. The Saints are down.
And here's Bum Phillips remembering those series of events.
If I had to do over again, I would do it the same way, strategically.
It was a tough loss for Bum Phillips, and as one of his assistant coaches would state years later, for all intents and purposes, Bum quit coaching after that contest, and his remaining 2 seasons in New Orleans just basically went through the motions. And now it's time for another Saints timeout. Most of the first half of the 1984 calendar year was about the New Orleans Breakers of the United States Football League. They moved over from Boston, and their team was sold to local owner Joseph Cannizzaro. The head coach was Dick Corey. The club started off 5-0, would gradually taper off to 7-4 before ending the season at 8-10. The 2 main reasons for the slip in the record had to do with injuries on defense and a gradual drop in endurance of starting quarterback Johnny Walton, who was 36 years old at the time. The most noteworthy player was Marcus Dupree. He was a star running back for the University of Oklahoma who had transferred to the University of Southern Mississippi. When he decided to leave that school, the USFL ruled that he could immediately become eligible, and the New Orleans Breakers were able to obtain his rights and signed him. Throughout the season, he suffered on and off from hamstring issues and would get just over 600 yards on the season. The leading rusher was Buford Jordan, who had over 1,200 yards and was a native of Iota, Louisiana. Other noteworthy players on the squad included wide receivers Nolan Franz and Frank Lockett, tight end Dan Ross, linebacker Marcus Mayrick, and kicker Tim Mazzetti. Because of the financial issues and the possibility of the USFL moving to a fall schedule, the team packed their bags and headed for Portland, Oregon in 1985. The offseason leading into the 1984 campaign had Bum Phillips trading a number 1 draft choice to the New York Jets in return for quarterback Richard Todd. The offseason was filled with speculation as to whether or not Saints owner John Mecum would sell the team. A group in Baltimore had expressed interest, but the stronger rumor became Jacksonville, Florida, as a group there offered Mecum $25 million in cash plus 10 years of guaranteed sellouts to move, but to his credit, Mecum turned it down. At one point, the concern of the Saints moving was so strong, then Governor Edwin Edwards told John Mecum Jr. that if he ever took the Saints out of Louisiana, he would make sure that he would never ever be able to do business in the state again. The most interesting move made during the season was on October 9th when Bum Phillips traded to get his old running back from Houston, Earl Campbell, in return for a future number 1 draft choice. It was a decision that brought up some degree of controversy. With that note, here's former Saints head coach turned CBS broadcaster Hank Stram about the trade.
There's a lot of speculation all over town as to whether that's a good trade or a bad trade. Bum Phillips felt that it was a good trade because it would help him win now. That's fine if they win now, but if they don't win now, they not only lose games, but they also will lose George Rogers.
Many had also felt that Earl Campbell was past his prime and that Bum only traded to get him in so that he and Earl could finish their careers together. The defense continued its aggression with 55 sacks, which included defensive leaders like linebacker Ricky Jackson, lineman Bruce Clark, and cornerback Dave Waymer with 4 interceptions. And to no one's surprise, the Saints once again had the number 1 defense in the National Conference. This 7-9 season started on a bit of an awkward note as Bum Phillips refused to name a starting quarterback until he literally arrived at the Superdome the morning of the first regular season game, a home contest against Atlanta, where the nod went to Richard Todd. Game 2 was an exciting comeback as the Saints beat the Buccaneers in the Dome 17-13. Hokie Gajon had a 51-yard catch to set up his own touchdown dive with less than 2 minutes to go. On the ensuing Tampa drive, a jumpy-gather sack on 4th down would seal the victory. Likely the toughest loss of the season was on October 21st in Dallas. The Saints would have a 27-6 lead going into the 4th quarter, including this long Hokie Gajon run.
On 1st down, Gajon left side. Gajon's in the open. Doesn't have great speed, but he may not need much. Not great enough. Emerson Walls doesn't have speed either, and Gajon goes the distance, 62 yards. This young man has really made a football player out of himself.
But the Dallas Cowboys would slowly come back as their starting quarterback Gary Hogenboom was benched for Danny White. White would come back to aid in 2 touchdowns. Then after both Saints quarterbacks Richard Todd and Dave Wilson got hurt, Kenny Stabler would go in, to which point near the end of regulation, the 3rd Dallas touchdown would be scored.
Stabler, fumble the ball. It's loose in the end zone. The Cowboys are there. Oh, no, I can't believe it. It was Randy White who hit Fable, knocked it loose, and then covered the ball. No, it's Jim Jeffcoat. You're right on that, I think.
The game would then go to overtime, where Dallas won the toss, elected to receive, and didn't give up the football.
And this will be from 41 yards out. Hit, solid, perfect. This one's over. It's history. The Cowboys come battling back. Not in a thing of beauty, but this could turn this football team around.
Final score, Dallas 30, New Orleans 27. 5 days later, Kenny Stabler announced his retirement from pro football after 16 seasons. Then on October 28th, a back-and-forth contest at the Cleveland Browns, which led to the Saints getting the ball back near the end and just getting into Morton Anderson's field goal range.
Wound down to 6 seconds to go. Now Morton Anderson will try and kick one of 53 yards to win the game. Merkins to hold. Yes, he made it by about a yard, maybe 2 feet. Unbelievable. And notice the job that Guido Merkins had to do to get the laces away from the kick. Look at Bum. I don't think Bum can believe it. He can.
Final score, New Orleans 16, Cleveland 14. And now as a little bit of lagniappe, here's Larry Madsen.
Morton Anderson coming in here. The holding phase. The kick is up. It's getting there. It's getting there. It's Saints win. 53-yard field goal. An unbelievable finish for Morton Anderson.
And then on November the 19th, the New Orleans Saints would finally break the Monday night jinx and win a contest on the primetime event 27-24. The most noteworthy play from the contest against the Pittsburgh Steelers was former Steeler Dennis "Dirt" Winston, running back an interception for a touchdown to seal the victory.
We're inside 7 minutes. Kickoff! That could be Dennis Winston, the former Steeler. Oh, Dirt's got to be happy. Dirt Winston, and you know he is thrilled. That'll teach you to trade me for a 6th-round draft pick. That's true. You're going to see some pretty good pressure by Whitney Paul. 47-yard return.
On February 14th, 1985, John Mecum Jr. broke off talks with A.N. Prisker on buying the New Orleans Saints. After this announcement, Jefferson Parish Sheriff Harry Lee talked to his good friend, Governor Edwin Edwards, about a New Orleans-based businessman named Tom Benson, who he felt would make a perfect owner for the football team. Edwards was able to get both the Mecum and Benson parties together, and by March 12th, an agreement in principle was made for Benson to buy the Saints. The deal was officially finalized on May 31st, 1985, for a total value of $70.8 million. Here's Tom Benson at that press conference.
I never have coached the team or play, so I don't want to start doing that now. The other thing is we got the #1 fans in the country, and I'm not kidding about that,
It was later disclosed that Benson only had to put $1 million down. Edwin Edwards was able to get several banks to come up with the rest of the money for Benson to purchase the team, in which he had a total of 10 years to pay off all the loans. With the success the Saints would have in Benson's early stage of ownership, he was able to both pay off the loans and buy out his minority owners in the Saints to become sole owner in 1990. The biggest offseason move was on April 25th, when running back George Rogers was traded to the Washington Redskins, along with future draft choices in the 5th, 10th, and 11th rounds of the '85 draft in return for the Redskins' first-round selection. Story goes, Bum gave the Redskins the 10th and 11th round selections without them asking, so he could leave the draft room early and go bet on the horses at the fairgrounds. The Saints would lose their first 2 regular season games of the season and then win 3 in a row, only to lose 6 straight after that. In that latter stretch, Bobby Hebert would start his first regular season game with the Saints against the Green Bay Packers. Strangely, his first NFL touchdown was not a pass. It was actually a reception after he pitched the ball off to utility man Guido Merkins, who in turn threw the ball to Hebert for the score. 1 week later, on November 24th, at the Minnesota Vikings, it would turn out to be Earl Campbell's last big game in the National Football League, as Bum Phillips had him carry the ball 35 times to set a then Saints carries record, but the Saints would still have to come back after the Vikings tied the game with under 2 minutes to go, as Bobby Hebert would throw the winning touchdown pass with 50 seconds left.
Hebert hits by pressure and hits John Tice, and the tight end is going to go in for the touchdown. And the Saints don't need the 3, they get the touch. A great call, and I'll tell you what, that's going to do wonders for Bobby Hebert. Play action fake right here. Minnesota almost up there in like a goal line stand. Studwell was coming in on a blitz, number 55. That's why the middle was open. So Minnesota took a chance, gambled on the blitz, and it cost them.
Final score, Saints 30, Minnesota 23. The next morning, Bum Phillips elected to step down as head coach.
Effective today, I've resigned as the head football coach and general manager of the New Orleans Saints, and the decision was mine and mine alone. My job here was to win football games, and my job here was to provide a winning season. Didn't do that.
One day later, his son Wade Phillips, who was defensive coordinator, would be elevated to interim head coach. Here's a look back at his father's influence on his career.
I've patterned most of my coaching, from my dad, certainly. I think you're influenced by your father anyway, and then when you go into the same profession, you tend to do a lot of the same things. I've always been proud that I'm his son and he's my dad. But I'm proud I work for him, as a lot of other guys can say the same thing. It was difficult taking over New Orleans. He retired, and he was really hadn't looked back since then, and has enjoyed his life as a rancher really since then, although he coaches me a lot.
Wade would win his first game as interim head coach, and the Saints would go on to lose their last three to finish the season 5-11. Wayne Wilson would lead the team in rushing with 645 yards. Hobie Brenner would lead in receiving with 42 catches for 652 yards. Dave Waymer in interceptions with 6. Ricky Jackson would lead the team in sacks with a total of 11. And Dave Wilson led the team in passing yards with 1,843. The offseason to follow would bring some of the more significant changes in New Orleans Saints history for the better. And now it's time to take another Saints timeout. On January 26, 1986, Super Bowl 20, as the NFC champion Chicago Bears, led by head coach Mike Ditka, faced the AFC champion New England Patriots, coached by Raymond Berry. The Bears dominated the contest largely thanks to defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan's 46 defense, which held the Patriots to only 123 total scrimmage yards. Bears defensive end Richard Dent was the game MVP.
Hello everyone, Dick Enwood with Merlin Olsen. As my friend Kurt Gowdy, the Hall of Famer, used to say, how about the game? Are we finally there? 2nd and 8 at the 11. Don Blackman was offside. So he is in the end zone for a touchdown. Chicago has 6 more. True running back is Payton. They've got nothing but linemen, including William Perry in the backfield. Perry will drive through, and following behind is McMahon for the touchdown. 2nd and 20. Here they come. A jailbreak. Wilson and Hampton this time. McMahon with good play action going for the bomb from his own end zone to Galt. They won't catch him except by the shirt tail. Marion saved the touchdown. So the Bears unloading with that great defense. They're showing all the weaponry, and McMahon from his own end zone hits Galt for 59 yards. Refrigerator, he's a lone setback now, and it's all disguised. McMahon rolls in a somersault 6, and the Bears lead 29-3. And intercepted for a touchdown, the rookie Reggie Phillips. The reality of 1st and goal. Perry, that one registered 3.8. Another Super Bowl record, the first refrigerator to score. And Walter Payton, I guess they figure they got a whole quarter to go. Another intercept. On his way, Tim Morrissey to the 5-yard line. Jim Morrissey, the rookie from Michigan State. 44-10, the Bears. 46-10, the Bears. He was down, whistled at safety, Chicago. Henry Waxter.
Henry Waxter, congratulations. You've just scored 2 points in the Super Bowl.
Some fans were upset that as the game was winding down and the Bears having the game at hand, star running back Walter Payton wasn't given another chance to score his first touchdown of the game. A decision coach Mike Ditka years later stated that was a mistake and, quote, "You can take away my touchdown in Super Bowl 6 and give it to Walter," close quote. Patriots wide receiver Irving Fryer scored the only New England touchdown. Bears wide receiver Willie Galt had 129 receiving yards. One of the more historic moves in Saints history occurred on January 14th, 1986, as Jim Finks was named general manager. The former Vikings and Bears GM had helped build those teams to playoff contention and was trying to do the same thing here in New Orleans.
I've felt ever since they came into the National Football League in 1967 that this could be one of the great franchises in the National Football League.
Potentially can be the best franchise in the National Football League. All you have to do is win, and we're going to find a way to win. When it's going to happen, I don't know, but I can assure you it will happen.
On January 28th, Jim Finks hired Jim Mora to be the next Saints head coach.
I can't tell you how glad I am to be standing up here today. I'm so tired of being rumored.
With an incredible amount of talent drafted in the April college selection, including tackle Jim Dombrowski, Running backs Dalton Hilliard and Reuben Mays and linebacker Pat Swilling, plus an influx of talent from the USFL such as Sam Mills, Antonio Gibson, and Buford Jordan, plus selections from the National Football League's USFL supplemental draft of '84, Vaughn Johnson and Mel Gray, not to mention, of course, Bobby Hebert, who had signed with the Saints in '85. The Saints of '86 finished 7-9. Mays rushed for 1,353 yards. Eric Martin led in receiving yards and punt returns. Dave Waymer had 9 interceptions, and Jumpy Gathers and Ricky Jackson each had 9 sacks. Week 3 had the San Francisco 49ers in a loss. Bobby Hebert injured his ankle and would miss the next 12 regular season games. Dave Wilson would fill in. In that same contest, Mel Gray would run back what was only the third Saints kickoff return for a touchdown at 101 yards. On October 12th at the Indianapolis Colts, Saints win 17-14, less than 2 minutes to go, and the Colts at the Saints 16-yard line. Linebacker James Haynes forces a fumble, which is recovered by Johnny Poe to seal the victory. On December 7th, at home against Miami in a 31-27 loss, Saints drive inside to the Miami 10-yard line late, but Dave Wilson's pass on 4th down was dropped with less than a minute to go. Reuben Mays would rush for 203 yards and at one point had the Saints rushing record for a single game, but a penalty called back the play that would have decided the record. December 14th at the Atlanta Falcons in a 14-9 win. Less than 2 minutes to go, quarterback Dave Wilson runs a bootleg to score a touchdown to get ahead. And then the Falcons drive all the way down to the Saints 5-yard line. Ricky Jackson sacks quarterback Scott Campbell with 5 seconds to go. Falcons tried to come back and looked like they scored the winning touchdown pass on the next play, but the officials ruled that the ball was snapped after the clock ran out. The Houdat fan base was more than excited about the '86 campaign, but maybe even some of the bigger of diehards couldn't imagine what was just around the corner. How appropriate it seemed that the day before a team called the Saints would start their 1987 regular season campaign in the Superdome versus the Cleveland Browns on September 13th, that facility would be used for a mass to honor the visiting Pope John Paul II. And indeed, a good precedent would follow as the club would have its first ever winning season at 12-3. That 28-21 win over the Browns was only the 4th opening day win in club history. In addition, the Saints would also score 2 safeties in the contest.
Saints lead 23-21. Second down at 6 from the 5 for Bernie Kosar and the Cleveland Browns. And he's hit again in the end zone. Safety. That's twice Kosar has been nailed in the end zone.
The Week 3 contest at home against the Atlanta Falcons was canceled due to an NFL players' strike, and the game would not be made up. For the next 3 games, a combination of veteran contracted players who crossed the picket line, combined with replacement players, and in the Saints' case included New Orleans native John Fourcade, who had played for several non-NFL teams in the 1980s, helped the Saints to a 2-1 record, including an overwhelming win at home against the Los Angeles Rams, a loss at the St. Louis Cardinals, largely contributed to special teams errors, and a win at the Chicago Bears in a close contest where strike kicker Florian Kemp made 4 field goals, and one of the 2 rotating quarterbacks for the Bears was future Saints head coach Sean Payton. And then it was time for the regular veteran players to return, though a handful of strike players were allowed to stay on. The next contest was October 25th in the Superdome against the San Francisco 49ers, a back-and-forth contest which resulted in a 24-22 loss when Morton Anderson missed a 52-yard field goal near the end of the game. However, what was stated after the game is more remembered than the game itself. Head coach Jim Mora to the media made it perfectly clear that the Saints weren't quite ready yet for the postseason.
Could have, would have, should have is the difference in what I'm talking about. The good teams don't come in and say could have. They get it done. All right? It's that simple. I'm tired of saying could have, should have, would have.
And what would turn out to be one of the greatest Saints rallying cries of all time led to the most interesting charge in club history. For the rest of the 1987 season, the Saints would go undefeated, starting on November 1 in a 38-0 win at Atlanta, and then a 17-point victory at the Los Angeles Rams. And then November 15th at the San Francisco 49ers, where the Saints came away with one of the more exciting plays on special teams.
This is to give the 49ers a lead if he can make it. And the kick is blocked. It's picked up by Johnny Poe. Johnny Poe gets credit for the touchdown. Reggie Sutton on the block, and the score, a 58-yard run.
In the fourth quarter, the Saints had to fight back to get close with San Francisco.
And now they'll be Morton Anderson's moment. With 1 minute and 11 seconds to go, Anderson has kicked 3 field goals today. This will be a 40-yard attempt. It's good. It barely made it over the crossbar, and the Saints mob Morton Anderson to give New Orleans a 26-24 lead.
This play featured some good fortune as Morton Anderson had slipped while trying to kick the ball, and that's why it only made it by about a yard. The 49ers did get the ball back and was driving downfield to try to get into field goal range with no timeouts left. With a few seconds left, nose tackle Tony Elliott actually kicked the football before the official had a chance to spot it for the next snap. As a result, the clock ran out and game over. The next week was a 9-point victory over the New York Giants in the Superdome. And then November 29th, 1987 at the Pittsburgh Steelers, the contest that would seal the Saints' first ever winning season.
Jim Henderson with you to tell you the play-by-play story of today's game. And who would have thought way back in 1966 that it would have taken 21 long years? Saints fans have waited for a winner. With a victory today, the Saints will ensure themselves of the first winning record in the franchise's history. Could this be the day that the Saints will be winners? Winners at long last.
The Saints were losing 14-3 at halftime. Likely the key play of the game was early in the fourth quarter when Steelers defensive back Rod Woodson was trying to field a punt. The ball was knocked loose by linebacker Joe Colbrand and recovered by cornerback Dave Waymer. The Saints would gradually take the lead 20-14, and then one of the most famous goal line stands in Saints defensive history would follow.
This will be, obviously, the play of the game. Malone is looking at a 4th and goal from the Saint 1-yard line. Pitching it to Pollard, sweeping left. He stopped short of the goal line. The Saints have held him inside the 1 on 4th down, and the ball will go back to New Orleans.
But there was still time left. The Saints would get the ball back, and on 4th down, punter Brian Hansen was asked to run out of the end zone for a safety, making it 20-16. Then the Saints would free kick where the Steelers would gradually drive downfield, eventually leading to this final play.
Into the end zone, it's picked off by Waymer. Back to the 10, 15, this one is over. Back to the 30, Waymer's going to keep running to the 40. He tackled there, the Saints have won it. The Saints are winners for the first time in 21 years.
The Saints are going to take a 20-16 victory back home to New Orleans, along with their first winning season ever.
Saints fans could be dancing and parading down the street, down in Bourbon Street in New Orleans tonight, starting right now.
It was a moment that Saints fans would forever treasure. During the post-game celebration in the locker room, cornerback Dave Waymer was overcome with emotion.
Had pretty good coverage on the guy. God, excuse me, man. It's been a long time.
You're a little overcome by the fact that you finally have a winning season.
Yeah, this is it. This is it.
Good feeling?
Yeah. This team deserves it, too.
And here's more memorable words from Jim Mora.
By achieving this, people can no longer say and write and talk about that the Saints are the only NFL team never to have a winning season.
The next week at home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a 44-34 win, the Saints would seal their first ever playoff appearance. The next week, the Saints would beat the Oilers in the Superdome by 14, and then one of the greatest comebacks in Saints history would occur in the cold weather at the Cincinnati Bengals. Bobby Hebert was hurt early on in the contest, and the Saints would be down 24-3. Backup Dave Wilson would come in and lead the charge with 38 unanswered points in a 41-24 victory.
Wilson goes up top. Mike Jones, touchdown New Orleans. Esiason is sacked. Ball's loose. New Orleans says they got it. They did. Pat Swilling comes up with the football. Ricky Jackson and Jim Wilkes made their head to knock it loose. Hilliard, touchdown Saints. John Tyson, Buford Jordan threw key blocks. And New Orleans comes roaring back for Dalton. That's his second touchdown today. Esiason looks deep, has the ball back. Picked off. Van Jakes inside the 20 to the 10. Gets the block. He's down to the 1-yard line. The kid straight ahead. Touchdown, New Orleans. Ball's loose. Saints have it. And Wilkes,
Ricky Jackson,
takes it down to the 20-yard line. And Boomer never saw him coming.
The Saints would close out the season with a 33-24 win over the Green Bay Packers in the Superdome on December 27th. Despite the 12-3 record, the Saints actually finished in second place in the NFC West, San Francisco finishing 13-2. To which that first ever Saints playoff game would be in the Louisiana Superdome on January 3rd, 1988 against the 8-7 Minnesota Vikings. Understandably, Saints fans thought it was really going to go their way early on.
Here's a pass play by Kramer. He scrambles and he is sacked back at the 12-yard line. Racing in there and getting the sack was Ricky Jackson, the linebacker. And Kramer fumbles. New Orleans thinks they had the ball. They do. at the 10-yard line. And on 2nd and goal, here's Hebert looking to pass, throws into the end zone. Touchdown! Eric Martin.
They were in a slot that time, Jack. Man-for-man coverage. And Eric Martin ran a post pattern, post flag, was wide open in the end zone.
But then little by little, the Minnesota Vikings would come back. Included in their 44-10 rout of the Saints was an Anthony Carter punt return, and on the last play of the first half, a Hail Mary.
High and long into the end zone, and it is a touchdown as Wilson threw it 44 yards. Hassan Jones, he came away with the ball.
Follow the bouncing ball. And that's exactly what happened. It tipped up there, and he kept his eyes on it, was able to suck it right out of the air and come up with a play.
30-10. Wasn't that crazy?
And converted on a 3rd and 18.
And there was no time on the clock. They prolonged the half because of the penalty against the defense for delay of game.
And while it was a tough loss to take, it was definitely a proud moment for Saints fans to finally reach the next level. Here's Jim Mora after the game.
You can't take away the fact that this team won 12 games this year and had the second best record in the National Football League, and I'm very proud of what this team's accomplished. Proud for them and for the whole organization. Very proud.
6 players were named to the Pro Bowl: Morton Anderson, Brad Edelman, Reuben Mays, Sam Mills, Hobie Brenner, and Dave Waymer. The Saints special teams would score 3 touchdowns in unique ways, 2 of them off of block punts and 1 off a block field goal. And the Saints defense, which included what would later be called the Dome Patrol linebacking corps, had 48 turnovers. Jim Finks was named NFL Executive of the Year and Jim Mora Coach of the Year. New Orleans Saints have had many training camps in their history, starting at Cal Western in 1967, Bowling Green, Kentucky in 1970, Hattiesburg, Mississippi in 71, Vero Beach in 74, Thibodaux in 75, back to Vero Beach from 76 to 84, Ruston, Louisiana in 85, and 86 and 87, Hammond, Louisiana. General Manager Jim Finks made a decision, finalized on April the 8th of 1988, that the Saints would move their training camp to La Crosse, Wisconsin. It was later disclosed that Mr. Finks felt the way Jim Mora pushed his players very hard during the practices that the excessive heat and humidity of South Louisiana may not be a very good environment for which that should occur. As a result, the cooler environment up north became the Saints' new summer home through 1999. The Saints started the 1988 campaign at home against the 49ers in a very tough and competitive 34-33 loss. Saints fans wouldn't have to wait very long for the Benson Boogie to return in celebrating Saints victories, as the Saints would rebound to win their next 7 in a row, with wins at Atlanta and at Detroit, where Ricky Jackson would score his only safety of his NFL career, at home versus Tampa Bay, and then a very exciting contest on Monday Night Football against Dallas on October 3rd. Dallas ties the game with 24 seconds left, but the Saints' resolve was still in place, as Mel Gray, who would bobble the following kickoff, would run it back 39 yards to the Saints' 42. 3 plays later, Bobby Hebert would hit Brett Perriman to get the Saints to the Cowboys' 32-yard line and set up Morton Anderson for the game-winning 49-yard attempt.
And this sellout crowd will let you know what happened. Snap is back. Kick is up, on its way, and it is good! The Saints have won! The Saints have won it on a 49-yard field goal by Morton Anderson, who's taking a victory lap around the field. Nobody can catch him to congratulate him.
3 more wins would follow, at San Diego, then at Seattle in a tough contest 20-19, where the Saints had to run back a blocked field goal for a touchdown. Then leading into the Raiders win on October 23rd, 20-6, offensive tackle Stan Brock was lost for the year with a knee injury that occurred during a full contact practice. In that Raiders victory, rookie running back Craig Ironhead Hayward, Saints first-round draft choice in '88, had the breakout run of the year.
Craig Hayward gets the call on first down. The big rookie spins out of the pack. Look at this run by Hayward! Ironhead all the way for a touchdown. That, friends, is the first NFL touchdown for Craig Hayward, a 73-yard run.
Then the Saints would lose 2 in a row at home to the Rams 12-10, where the Rams scored on 4 field goals. Then at Washington 27-24, where during the contest, Saints offensive lineman Jim Dombrowski was called for a 15-yard penalty for taking a swing at Redskins defensive lineman Dexter Mantley on a field goal attempt when Dexter Mantley before the snap had spit in Dombrowski's face. A victory would follow at the LA Rams, and then an overwhelming win at home 42-0 over Denver on November 20th, where the Saints' Mel Gray ended a 20-year punt return touchdown drought.
Return is on. Short kick. Gray, 35, 45. He's going to go all the way. 65 yards. Mel Gray, touchdown New Orleans.
Saints were 9-3, but unfortunately were not able to get into the postseason. On November 27th on Sunday Night Football, in what ESPN would later call the greatest defensive NFL game it ever broadcast, the Giants defeated the Saints 13-12 on a late field goal. Then the next week at the Minnesota Vikings, the Saints would lose 45-3. And finally, in a game that decided both the playoffs and the division title, the Saints would lose at the 49ers 30-17. They would wrap up the season on December the 18th in a home win over Atlanta 10-9. The final record for the season, 10-6. The offseason leading into 1989 was the first of 4 off seasons where the NFL invoked Plan B free agency, where every team could protect 37 players, whether or not their contracts were up. Any player left off the protected list could talk to other teams, and if said teams made them an offer, their current team had the right to try to match or beat the offer. The most noteworthy Saints departure was return specialist Mel Gray, who signed with the Detroit Lions. The Saints elected not to match the offer because at the time it was felt that Saints administration wanted players that did more than just play special teams outside of kickers and punters. Some felt the decision of letting Gray go would haunt the Saints on the special teams front for a handful of years to come. Probably one of the more interesting notes of the 1989 season was well away from the field, as Saints general manager Jim Finks was in line to possibly become NFL commissioner. However, after several stalemate votes in September into October, the old guard and new guard owners decided to reach a compromise, and on October 26th, named league attorney Paul Tagliabue as new commissioner. Jim Finks was offered the title of NFL president, but he turned it down because he thought the description was a little bit vague. The 89 Saints season started off on a big note as they opened in the Louisiana Superdome against the Dallas Cowboys with a 28-0 victory. In the contest, Dave Waymer would be the recipient of Cowboy rookie quarterback Troy Aikman's first ever interception. One day after the win, star outside linebacker Ricky Jackson was involved in a car accident. Initially, it was thought he might miss several weeks of action, but wound up only missing 2 games and had a brand new face mask designed to help protect his wired jaw, a design that he would keep for the rest of his career and became his unofficial trademark. The Saints also during this campaign had a bit of a teeter-totter when it came to punters. Brian Hansen was let go after the 88 season and replaced with George Winslow. However, because of both some punting issues and what Jim Mora felt somewhat questionable ability to hold for Morton Anderson field goals, Winslow was released after 4 regular season games and replaced with Tommy Barnhart, who had kicked with the Saints briefly in the strike of 87. 4 losses in a row would follow, including at Green Bay, where on a 4th down and 17 situation late in the contest, Packers receiver Jeff Query was given credit for a pass reception. The replay booth ruled that he caught the pass in bounds, even though it was obvious by many angles Query was out of bounds. Packers went on to score the winning touchdown from there. The next week at Tampa Bay in a 20-10 loss, both quarterbacks Bobby Hebert and John Fourcade were taken out of the game because of injuries. Since third-string quarterback Dave Wilson was on the inactive list for the contest, some concern had Lonzel Hill, wide receiver, going into the game at quarterback for the second half, but Bobby Hebert was able to resume his play despite having a knocked-out tooth. And then back in the Superdome on October 8th against the 49ers. Originally scheduled for at San Francisco, but because of the October 89 earthquake, the 2 home and away dates between the 2 teams had to be swapped over structure issues with Candlestick Park. The 49ers would win 24-20, but 2 of the touchdowns should have been replay overturned and were not, including a Jerry Rice touchdown where he actually fumbled at the 2-yard line, and the ball wound up going out of the end zone, which should have been a touchback for the Saints. 3 wins in a row would follow, at home against the New York Jets, at the LA Rams, and at home against Atlanta to go 4-4. And then that winning streak came to a crashing stop as on Monday Night Football in San Francisco, the Saints would be blown out 31-13. A win at New England would follow 28-24 due to an injury to guard Brad Edelman. Jim Dombrowski, for the first time in a Saints uniform, moved over from the tackle to the guard position and would wind up staying there for the rest of his Saint career. The next week, a win over Atlanta, which was followed by one of the more memorable losses in club history. November the 26th in the Superdome against the LA Rams. Rams wide receiver Flipper Anderson would set a then NFL record with 336 receiving yards. The Saints held a 17-3 lead with 4:40 left in regulation and allowed the Rams to score 2 touchdowns to tie it up at 17. In the 4th quarter, the Saints offense did not get a single first down. The game would go on to overtime, where the Rams' Mike Lansford would kick the winning 31-yard field goal. Final score 20-17 Rams. And then the next week, the Saints would lose 21-14 at the Detroit Lions to fall to 6-7 and be mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. After this contest, the story goes that Bobby Hebert and his agent Greg Campbell were given a verbal commitment by Saints general manager Jim Finks that he would get a brand new contract once the season was over and that he would be paid a starter salary that would be an average of what the top 10 quarterbacks in the league were making at the time. And then an announcement was made shortly afterwards that John Forcade would be the starter for the last 3 games, stating that they wanted to give him real-time regular season experience. Forcade's first start was at the Buffalo Bills on December the 10th in a 22-19 win. Turnovers on both sides kept the contest very competitive. Morton Anderson gave the Saints the lead for good on a 21-yard field goal just inside of 2 minutes left. The field goal nearly missed because of a strong crosswind. When Buffalo tried to come back, Brett Maxey intercepts a Jim Kelly pass to seal the victory. 2 more victories would follow to close up the season on Monday Night Football at home against the Eagles and on Christmas Eve against the Colts, also in the Superdome, 41-6. The story goes, as Jim Finks was watching the Colts contest, he truly thought that he had a second starting quarterback on his team in John Forcade. As a result, when the season ended, Jim Finks told Bobby Hebert and agent Greg Campbell that there was no way he could keep that earlier verbal promise because he technically wasn't the starting quarterback anymore. To which one of the more interesting off seasons in Saints history would occur. But before we get to that, at season's end, Dalton Hilliard would go on to the Pro Bowl. He would rush for 1,262 yards that season and score 18 rushing touchdowns. Pat Swilling, an outside linebacker, had 16.5 sacks. And now here's our list of some of the more memorable Saints players from the 1980s. Quarterback, Bobby Hebert. Running backs, George Rogers and Reuben Mays. Fullback, Buford Jordan. Wide receivers, Eric Martin and Jeff Groth. Tight end, Hobie Brenner. Offensive tackles, Stan Brock and Dave LaFari. Guards, Brad Edelman and Steve Trapillo. Center, Steve Court. Defensive ends, Frank Warren and Bruce Clark. Defensive tackles, Jim Wilkes and Tony Elliott. Linebackers, Ricky Jackson, Sam Mills, Pat Swilling and Jim Kovach. Cornerbacks, Dave Waymer and Johnny Poe. Safeties, Russell Gary and Frank Watlett. Kicker, Morton Anderson. Punter, Brian Hansen. Return specialist, Mel Gray. Special teams coverage, Benny Thompson. Deep snapper, Jim Peterzak. And holder, Brian Hansen. And now it's time for another Saints timeout. It was January 28, 1990, and the Louisiana Superdome hosted Super Bowl 24 as the 11-5 Denver Broncos, led by head coach Dan Reeves, took on rookie head coach George Seifert in the San Francisco 49ers. It turned out to be a very lopsided affair as the 49ers went on to win 55-10. Their quarterback Joe Montana was named game MVP. It was the 3rd time he was awarded the coveted title.
Montana looks to Rathman, hits Rice. Rice scores for San Francisco. Montana, Nick Jones, 49er touchdown. Rathman, touchdown. Montana going up top to Rice, touchdown. 38 yards away. That's worse than being vulnerable. They're getting killed.
49ers wound up with 461 offensive yards and kept the ball for over 39 minutes. Joe Montana had 5 touchdown passes to set a then Super Bowl record. Wide receiver Jerry Rice had 7 catches for 148 yards and 3 touchdown catches. The victorious locker room featured the trophy presentation to 49ers owner Edward DeBartolo by new commissioner Paul Tagliabue.
Eddie, today the 49ers finished their trip to becoming one of the elite teams in the history of the National Football League. The team did it in dominating fashion, as you've done in the playoffs, as you did it throughout the season. You've won your 4th Super Bowl. Congratulations.
To you men, we have one hell of a football team, and I love you. God bless you, and thank you for being world champion.
Coach Seifert also got a word in.
We're so happy and proud of this football team. There's no question about it. I'm happy for them as they were able to achieve this goal. And if they want to go for another one, that's fine with me.
The off-season leading into the 1990 campaign was dominated by the Bobby Hebert contract situation. When Plan B free agency began on February 1st, Hebert was on the protected list. However, the most noteworthy unprotected player was fan favorite Dave Waymer, who left for the 49ers. Reports surfaced on March 27, 1990, that Raiders' Al Davis was ready to trade a 1st and 5th round draft choice plus running back Marcus Allen in return for Hebert. A later report had the Saints turning it down because they wanted guard Steve Wisniewski. Finks and Hebert would meet face-to-face on April 24th, their first meeting since the '89 season season ended, but said meeting didn't come close to any agreement. Here's Jim Finks on the matter.
How do you talk to some guy who says, I'm not going to play here under any circumstances?
Make him an offer.
Oh, obviously you don't know how this business works. I take his word for it that they will not play here under any circumstances.
Through preseason, the trade deadline in mid-October, and the rest of the season, there was no contract nor trade. Here's Hebert from September 23rd.
Well, I can go back to the Saints and play. I haven't burned any bridges. I have a great relationship with the players and the coaches. I think in New Orleans they have the greatest football fans in the NFL. It's just a matter of, the business of football, and I'm just trying to do what's best for Bobby Hebert and his family. And, well, I don't really think I was ever number 2 in New Orleans. My situation way back in December, that I wasn't going to ever get market value the way Mr. Finks runs things.
Hebert and agent Greg Campbell sued in different levels of court, but was not successful in getting a trade or released. Most players remained behind Bobby Hebert in his contract fight, and a resolution wouldn't occur until June of '91. The Saints had some other bumps in the road they had to deal with, including the April 30th suspension of defensive end Frank Warren for 1 season over his 3rd violation of the NFL's banned substance and drug policy. In addition, at a scrimmage in London as the Saints were getting ready to play a preseason game versus the Raiders, guard Brad Edelman was lost for the season with a torn tricep muscle. He would end up retiring from football, and 9-year quarterback Dave Wilson was released from training camp. He would be replaced on August 14th with former Viking Tommy Kramer. The Saints would open up the regular season on Monday Night Football in the Superdome against the San Francisco 49ers. Quarterback John Fourcade would start. Offensive coordinator Carl Smith had changed up the offense somewhat, not wanting Fourcade to run around as much. Time management became the key in the game as the Saints would not score any touchdowns but were unsuccessful in running out the clock late in the game. As a result, the Saints had to punt. 49ers would slowly drive downfield.
First down from the 19-yard line. And Taylor gets open at the 40, makes the catch, tackled at the 43 by Gene Atkins. 31 seconds. And Montana does it to Rice, who makes the catch. That takes it to the 20. Prevent defense, and the 49ers are just eating it alive. As Montana stops the clock with 12 seconds. And here is Cofer now, officially 38. Helping to put it down. Chuck Thomas to snap it. And the kick is good. And the Superdome is quiet.
And the 49ers would win 13-12. Pounding loss at Minnesota would follow. Then the next week, the Saints would have their first victory of the regular season at home against the Cardinals. 2 days after the Cardinals win, Saints general manager Jim Finks still had concerns about the quarterback position. So instead of trying to reconnect with Bobby Hebert, he elected to make a trade with Dallas. The Cowboys sent quarterback Steve Walsh in return for a 1st and 3rd round pick in '91 and a 2nd round pick in '92 that some members of the media called the Lawrence Welk trade, a 1, a 2, and a 3. Upon trade completion, backup quarterback Tommy Kramer was released. On October 7th at the Atlanta Falcons, a back-and-forth contest, quarterback Chris Miller of Atlanta hits Andre Rison, wide receiver, on a short route that results in a touchdown with just under 1:30 left in the game. Falcons 28, Saints 27. The game that appeared to be a strange microcosm of the whole season was on October 14th at home against the Cleveland Browns. Very late in the contest, Morton Anderson makes a 30-yard field goal to put the Saints up by 8, 28-20. This, of course, in the era before the 2-point conversion came into the NFL. However, the Browns were offsides on the play. Coach Jim Mora elected to take the points off the board and take the 1st and goal at the 8. The Saints wound up losing yardage on the next 3 downs and be backed up, where Morton Anderson wound up missing the ensuing 39-yard field goal attempt. The Browns would get the ball back with 8 seconds to go, but were unsuccessful, and a loss at the Houston Oilers would follow. And then in the Superdome on October 28th, the Saints would lose to the Detroit Lions 27-10, a contest in which the Saints would have 8 turnovers. Then on November 4th at Cincinnati, in a 21-7 victory, the Saints had dual 100-yard rushers in Craig Hayward and Reuben Mays. Hayward would also get over 100 rushing yards the following week in a 35-7 victory over the Buccaneers in the Superdome. And then on November 25th in the Superdome, in a 10-7 win over Atlanta, wide receiver Eric Martin became the Saints' all-time leading receiver. On December 16th, they would lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Superdome 9-6, one of the rare times an opponent did not score a touchdown and still retained as the victor. And then December 23rd at the San Francisco 49ers. The Saints were 6-8, struggling to stay in playoff contention. The Saints wound up winning the game 13-10.
53 seconds to go, and the 49ers 1 timeout left. Fumble! Dexter Carter's 2nd fumble of the game. Saints have it.
Going into the last week of regular season football, the Saints had to win and the Dallas Cowboys had to lose in order for the Saints to get final wild card spot, this being the first year the National Football League expanded the playoffs from 5 to 6 teams in each conference. The Saints would play on Monday night in the Superdome against the Rams. However, there was actually some concern the game may not sell out in time for the local blackout to be lifted. The irony was the game did sell out because a rival car dealer to Tom Benson named Ronnie Lamarck agreed to buy out all the unsold tickets. On December 30th, the Atlanta Falcons actually did the Saints a favor by defeating Dallas in Fulton County Stadium. The Rams would come back to tie the game at 17 near the 2-minute mark. From there, the Saints would slowly take matters into their own hands.
Short kick, 17-yard line, Gene Atkins. And he's bumped out at the 43-yard line. Walsh underneath, it's Perryman to the Rams 45, first down. It's caught by Martin inside the 30, inside the 20, out of bounds at the 13. 29-yard attempt. And a flag is that Alvin Wright was the guy who blocked it.
Offside, defensive nosedive. After distance, repeat second down.
A 25-yard try. Barnhart again will spot the ball at the 15-yard line. He spots the ball. Anderson kicks it. The Saints win. The Saints win. 20-17.
The Saints' victory put them at 8-8 and back into the postseason for the first time in 3 years. The playoff game was at Chicago, January the 6th. Probably the most controversial play of the game was when the Saints blocked a Chicago Bears field goal attempt and it was run back for a touchdown by defensive back Vince Buck. However, the play was called back because officials ruled cornerback Robert Massey lined up offside on the play. The Chicago Bears did a good job of using their home field advantage along with time management, using running back Neil Anderson, who had 144 combined yards in the contest, plus the Bears' only touchdown scored by James Thornton. The Saints defense held firm, but unfortunately the Saints offense could not manage a touchdown. Morton Anderson responsible for 2 field goals. As a result, the Chicago Bears were the victors, 16-6. And now it's time for another Saints timeout. In 1991 and 92, New Orleans joined the ranks of the Arena Football League with a franchise called the Knight. That's N-I-G-H-T. The league office originally ran the franchise until it could find a permanent owner. The original head coach was Ed Kayat, who had been a Saints assistant coach from 1967 to 70. Along with assistant coaches Harold Jackson and Brian Gardner, the club went 4-6 their first year. By far, the 2 star players on the club were wide receivers / defensive backs Willie Culpepper and Milton Barney. Near the end of the 91 season, the league did find an owner in Mike McBath, a former Buffalo Bills player who had been a minority shareholder in the Orlando Predators. Leading into the 1992 campaign, both Kayat and Jackson left the Knight to join the Tampa Bay Buccaneers of the NFL. Some 15 of the 20 players from the previous year did not return to the squad, and new head coach Vince Gibson, formerly of Tulane University, definitely had his work on his hands. And despite bringing in former Saints defensive end Bruce Clark, the club mightily struggled with a record of 0-10. Upon conclusion of the 92 season, the club folded. The offseason leading into the 1991 Saints campaign had defensive end Frank Warren returning from his 1-year drug suspension, and on June 3rd, Bobby Hebert was re-signed with a new 2-year contract. General manager Jim Finks was not present at the signing. Training camp started in mid-July, and on July 19th, late in the night, a shocking announcement was made as running back Reuben Mays announced his retirement from the NFL. Some felt he did so over past frustrations with his contract, and after sitting out all of 91, he would be traded to the Seahawks before the draft in 92. Also on July 30th, quarterback John Fourcade was released. With his departure, the 3 Saints quarterbacks were Bobby Hebert, Steve Walsh, and Mike Buck. Leading into the regular season, defensive back Robert Massey was traded to the Cardinals, and wide receiver Brett Perriman was sent to the Lions. The Saints would start the regular season 7-0. The regular season opener was at home against the Seattle Seahawks, a contest where Bobby Hebert was initially booed when he came out onto the field. However, those boos turned to cheers as on that first Saints offensive drive.
Second down and 9. Hebert passes complete 30, 25, 20. Gil Finnerty into the end zone. Touchdown Saints.
Pat Swilling, en route to being the 1991 National Football Conference Defensive Player of the Year, also ran back an interception for a touchdown. Seattle kept it close, and the Saints needed to come back to win the contest.
The line of scrimmage is the 10. Hilliard is back with Hebert. 4th and goal. Over the middle.
Poor Jerry
a great catch.
With the Saints up 27-24, Seattle tried to come back very late to tie the contest. Rookie Seattle Seahawk kicker John Casey should have had a simple 22-yard field goal to attempt. But before the snap, quarterback Dave Craig, who was injured and removed from the game earlier, told off an official and got a 15-yard unsportsmanlike penalty. As a result, the field goal attempt was moved back to 37 yards, to which Casey hooked the ball left. The toughest game of the first 7 was at Philadelphia on October the 13th. While the Saints won 13-6, quarterback Bobby Hebert would get hurt, and the after effects from which would cause him to miss 6 games later in the season. The Saints fans' new cheer for the season was "Cha-ching," largely inspired by a local restaurant chain's advertisements, uttered by an up-and-coming actor named Seth Green.
Large fries and a large soda, cha-ching! Sandwich, large fries, and a vanilla milkshake. Bada-bing!
The first loss of the year was on October 27th in the Superdome against the Chicago Bears. On the last play of the first half,
Bringing Morton Anderson in, they're going to try the cannon.
It'll be from 60. That's far enough. Good.
going into the final 2 minutes of the contest, the Saints defense held the Bears to -9 net passing yards. With the 17-13 lead late in the contest, the Saints just needed a first down to run out the clock and win the game. But on third down, Dalton Hilliard was stopped by William the Refrigerator Perry. The Bears were greatly assisted when Saints punter Tommy Barnhart had a 16-yard shank, allowing Chicago to only have to drive 52 yards for the winning points.
59 seconds left. Harbaugh back to throw it. Touchdown Bear to Waddle.
2 more victories would follow, including a home win on November 10th against the San Francisco 49ers. During halftime, the Superdome put on a fireworks show. Apparently, one of the fireworks festered on a piece of canvas hanging above the Superdome. The result from that?
Now there's guys out in the middle of the field. They're picking up the cinders or something.
That's a stubborn fire.
Oh, a big piece is falling down right now, right in the middle of the field. Officials ought to take time out. In fact, I think the referee just saw that one.
That'll burn a hole in this artificial turf.
This makes the football game become secondary. Firefighters are coming from all over. The guy is up on top putting the fire out with the blanket, and the thing that put it out was a big old bucket of Gatorade. Came from the Saints bench, just threw it on the fire.
Saints would lose 4 games in a row from Game 11 through Game 14. This included a 24-21 loss at San Diego on November 17th, where defensive end Frank Warren picked up a blocked punt and ran it back for a touchdown. However, because of a late fourth-quarter fumble by Fred McAfee, it allowed the Chargers to stay in the contest. And then later on the final play of the game, Chargers kicker John Carney makes the winning field goal. And then on Sunday Night Football, November 24th, the Saints hosted the Atlanta Falcons in a battle for the division lead. With 3 minutes left in regulation, a Fred McAfee fumble allowed Atlanta to tie the contest at 20. When the Saints got the ball back, 1st and 10 at their own 25-yard line, Saints head coach Jim Mora told quarterback Steve Walsh to go with 3 running plays. That wound up leaving some time on the clock, and when the Saints punted back to Atlanta, they had the opportunity to try 2 Hail Mary passes, which both failed. The game ends up going to overtime, a very long battle, but with 2:09 left,
Norm Johnson, Bullhaig is the holder. It's a 50-yarder to win it. Got a chance. It's good.
final score 23-20 Atlanta. Losses at San Francisco and Dallas would follow, and then Bobby Hebert returned to the lineup in time for a Monday night game at home. The Saints wind up running over the Raiders 27-0. And now heading into the last week of regular season football, the Atlanta Falcons held a slight tiebreaker edge over the Saints. Earlier in the afternoon, the Falcons lost to the Dallas Cowboys, opening the opportunity for the Saints to win their first ever division title. The Saints were on the road at the Phoenix Cardinals. The Saints would win the contest 27-3 thanks to a dominating offense, plus the Saints defense has 5 interceptions in the contest. Gene Atkins would get 3 of those, plus 2 fumble recoveries. The Saints were finally NFC West division champ. Here's Jim Mora in the victorious locker room.
We got it done, that's what counts, right? Hey, getting it done what counts. It took a little longer than we thought. Let me tell you something. You guys deserve to be the NFC West champs. You're the best football team in this damn division. A hell of a job. Feel good about it. I'm proud of you. Be happy. Enjoy it. You're the champs for the NFC West.
And then on December 28th, the Saints would play in their 3rd ever postseason game, this time in the Superdome against the Atlanta Falcons. Going into the contest, the Saints were missing 3 defensive backs because of injury. In this very close contest, 3 officiating calls went against the Saints, which to some degree, according to replay, should have gone in their favor. The deciding play occurred with 2:41 left, as quarterback for the Falcons, Chris Miller, hit New Orleans native wide receiver Michael Haynes for a 61-yard touchdown pass.
2nd down and 9.
attack. Haynes into Saint territory. Michael Haynes, who was born and raised in New Orleans, has just scored a touchdown that may have taken the Saints out of the playoffs.
And take the 27-20 victory. The Saints tried to come back afterwards, but Falcons defensive back Tim McKyer would intercept the pass. But overall, it was a season that definitely should be celebrated. Before the 1992 Saints campaign began, an important signing occurred on September 3rd as head coach Jim Mora and general manager Jim Finks were given 3-year contract extensions. 1992 was one of the best seasons in Saints history with a record of 12-4. The defense provided 18 interceptions and 57 sacks. Sack leaders included defensive lineman Wayne Martin, linebackers Ricky Jackson, and Pat Swilling. The defense was so pronounced at the February 1993 Pro Bowl, all 4 members of the Dome Patrol, Jackson, Swilling, Sam Mills, and Vaughn Johnson, played in the game at the same time. That defensive unit also scored 6 touchdowns, 3 off of interceptions by Toy Cook, Reggie Jones, and Vince Buck, and 3 off fumble recoveries by Sam Mills and 2 by Pig Goff. The Saints would start the season at Philadelphia on September 6th in a 15-13 loss, and then would come back the next week at home to beat the Chicago Bears 28-6, featuring long offensive touchdowns by Eric Martin for 52 yards, Wesley Carroll for 72 yards, plus these 2 defensive touchdowns.
3rd and 7. Jackson forces the ball free, and Robert Goff has it for a Saints touchdown. Ricky Jackson forced it, and Robert Goff picked it up and ran 22 yards for the touchdown. 2:24 to go. Look out! This could be a touchdown. It's Reginald Jones. 2 touchdowns in the 4th quarter for the Saints. Saints defense, that is.
A win at Atlanta would follow, and then on September 27th, a home contest against the 49ers that came down to the wire. The Saints would have the football at the 49er 12-yard line with 19 seconds left when
Hebert from the shotgun, being flushed out, running away, gets away from Pierce Holt, throws in the back of the end zone. It's a jump ball, and San Francisco has intercepted the football. San Francisco's John Johnson.
Final score, 49ers 16, Saints 10. 5 straight wins would follow at Detroit versus the Rams, at Phoenix versus Tampa Bay, and at New England. Then the rematch on November 15th at San Francisco, another tough loss. With just under a minute to go.
Young to throw, and the pass caught by Brent Jones. Touchdown. 2 touchdown catches by Brent Jones here in the 4th quarter.
The 8-yard touchdown pass would give the 49ers a 1-point lead. The Saints would then try to drive downfield to get into field goal range. On what turned out to be the last play of the game, Dalton Hilliard would lateral to tackle Richard Cooper. Richard Cooper runs out of bounds, but is hit late by a 49er defender. The officials refused to throw a flag on the play, which would have been 15 yards and put the Saints in field goal range for Morton Anderson. Final score, San Francisco 21-20. And then the Saints would have to play 3 games at home in 11 days. A Monday night win over Washington 20-3, a Sunday contest over Miami 24-13, and a rather interesting and perplexing contest at home against Atlanta on Thursday night with a 22-14 win. The Saints would not score a single offensive touchdown in the game.
Tommy Barnum, you betcha, who blew one earlier in case he joined us late, went right through his hands, resulted in an Atlanta touchdown. Morton Anderson has kicked 5 field goals tonight.
Late in the game, the Saints defense would have a response.
Intercepted Toy Cook into the touchdown and in.
The Saints were fortunate since replay was no longer in effect after 6 consecutive seasons because Toy Cook stepped out of bounds on his way to the end zone, but the officials didn't catch it. 10 days would go by before the next Saints game, which was a win at the LA Rams, and then a tough loss would follow at home on December 20th against the Buffalo Bills. Jim Kelly and his vaulted offense was just a little bit better than the Saints and came out with the 20-16 win. The last regular season game of the season was the day after Christmas on a Saturday at the New York Jets. Saints walk away with a 20-0 win, including this touchdown.
3rd down and 7. Nagle loses the ball, and it's first and picked up by Sam Mills. Mills into Jet territory, and he's going to outrun the Jet offensive line. Jim Sweeney and score a touchdown. No penalty markers are down.
The play would cover 76 yards. And an interesting factoid for all you trivia fans. The Saints kicked off to start both the first and second half. The Saints won the toss in the first half and elected to defer. As a result, the Jets elected to receive to start the game. In the second half, because of a brisk wind, Jim Mora elected to take the wind to his back in the fourth quarter. As a result, the Jets decided to receive. And then the Saints were back in the playoffs, hosting the Philadelphia Eagles on January 3rd, 93. The Saints would lead 17-7 at halftime.
Handoff goes to Hayward over right tackle. Touchdown Saints. It's 6-0 with 9:20 remaining in the first period.
Other Saints first half scores included a Morton Anderson field goal and a 7-yard touchdown reception by Quinn Early. However, at halftime, offensive coordinator Carl Smith elected to make adjustments. As a result, the third quarter was a stalemate, a field goal for each team, Saints winning 20-10 after 3. And then from 11 minutes left in the fourth quarter to 2 minutes left in the contest, the Eagles would come storming back with 26 unanswered points.
Going deep. Touchdown. Fred Barnett, a diving catch, spectacular catch from 35 yards away. They had him covered.
And the scoring also included a safety by defensive end Reggie White and an interception run back by Eric Allen. It was one of 3 interceptions in the second half by the Eagles defense, largely aided by those Saints adjustments. In addition, prior to the 26 unanswered points, the Saints only had 1 first down in that second half. It was a disappointing way to end such a great season. However, the upcoming offseason would bring some changes that would be rather surprising and stunning. The 1993 Saints calendar year, it was very busy to say the least. Not long after the postseason ended, tackle Stan Brock was told he would not be re-signed by the club, which stemmed from an argument he had with offensive line coach Paul Boudreau. Jim Mora usually favored his coaches in said arguments. As a result, Brock would sign with the San Diego Chargers on May the 19th. March 1st marked the beginning of the first true free agency period in NFL history. On March the 10th, Steve Trapillo became the first Saints player to leave in true free agency, as he signed with less money with the New England Patriots because that part of the country is where he was from. On March 27th, Bobby Hebert is offered a 2-year, $6.2 million non-guaranteed contract. At the time, he rejects it because he wanted a 4-year deal that was guaranteed. Then on April the 12th, the Saints signed their first ever modern era free agency veteran and quarterback Wade Wilson from Atlanta, who gets $2 million a year for 3 years. At that same announcement, it is stated that Bobby Hebert would not be offered a contract, to which general manager Jim Fink states, quote, "The longer it dragged out and the more we thought about it and the consequences of having Bobby back or not having him back, it began to take shape where we think it's in our best interest to go in another direction," close quote. Hebert's agent Greg Campbell states that the Friday before, Finks had sent him a contract offer and Campbell approved it. Also that same day, fullback Craig Hayward signs with the Chicago Bears. 7 days after that, the Saints sign away Chicago fullback Brad Muster. And on April 21st, Bobby Hebert signs with the Atlanta Falcons for $3 million a year for 4 seasons. Then on April 25th, the same day as the collegiate draft, the Saints trade linebacker Pat Swilling to Detroit in return for the Lions' first and fourth round draft selections. Even though Swilling had a no-trade clause in his contract, he agreed to waive it so the deal could occur. The first of the Saints' 2 first-round selections in the draft was offensive tackle William Rowe from Louisiana Tech, who would become one of the great names in Saints history along the offensive line. Also chosen in the first round was tight end Irv Smith. Chosen in the 5th round of that same draft was Tyrone Hughes, a New Orleans native from St. Augustine High School, who was a kick returner as well as wide receiver and defensive back at the University of Nebraska. He would become the star return man the Saints had been looking for since the departure of Mel Gray after '88. And then came a rather unfortunate announcement on April 29th. Here's Saints owner Tom Benson.
And Jim, as you know, hadn't been feeling good. And of course, unfortunately, the diagnosis came out that it was cancer. It's terrible.
1 day later, it was confirmed Jim Finks was diagnosed with lung cancer. As a result, Tom Benson took over the title of interim general manager for the 1993 season. During the exhibition season, Saints center Joel Hilgenberg was injured, so as a result, Coach Morris signed his brother Jay, the longtime Chicago Bear and Cleveland Brown center, to a 1-year contract. The 1993 regular season would start off on spectacular fashion on Sunday Night Football. The Saints would win the contest 33-21. The play that symbolized the excitement of the contest came in the fourth quarter.
4th down and 3 from the 42-yard line. I think the Saints are going to bring them all. It's a blitz and a fumble. The Saints pick it up. 45-40, 35-30, 25-20. Frank Warren will score. Unbelievable. 48-yard fumble return. The sack was by Sam Mills.
And then the next week, September 12th, at the Atlanta Falcons, the Saints would finish with 557 total offensive yards. It started off exciting as Lorenzo Neal, fullback from Fresno State, drafted in '93, would run 74 yards for a touchdown. He unfortunately would injure his lower leg later in the contest and be out for the rest of the season. The Saints would have a 31-10 lead through 3 quarters. Bobby Hebert would come into Game 4 Atlanta, replacing Chris Miller, and lead them to 3 consecutive touchdowns, including a 98-yarder to future Saint wide receiver Michael Haynes. Earlier in the contest, Morton Anderson had made a field goal, which gave him the then NFL record of 25 consecutive field goals made. He would go on to miss 2 field goals in the contest, including one with roughly under 1 minute to go that kept the game at 31. The Falcons get the ball back, and on that ensuing drive...
Second down and 6, Hebert back to pass. Fumbles! Saints recovered the 32! Ronaldo Turnbull, Bobby Hebert, stepped up in the pocket, but Turnbull came behind him, caused the fumble. The Saints fall on it, and I think Morton Anderson's going to get another opportunity.
Turnbull's sack, forced fumble, and fumble recovery of Hebert led to this game-winning Morton Anderson field goal.
43-yard field goal attempt. Barnhart to hold with 5 seconds left. Here's the snap. Ball down. Kick in the air. It's good! The Saints win! Morton Anderson redeems himself. If you're looking for a big play, whoop! There it is!
That comment made at the end of the field goal by then Saints play-by-play announcer David Garrett was the definite rallying cry for 1993 Saints fans. The following week, a victory over the Lions would occur, and then 1 week after that, on September 26th, the Saints would host the 49ers in a very exciting and competitive divisional contest. It was a game where both defenses dominated. Late in the fourth quarter, the Saints defense held the 49ers at bay and allowed them to kick a field goal to tie the contest at 13. From there, the Saints offense would slowly drive downfield. A couple of important catches by Eric Martin on that drive would lead to this Morton Anderson field goal.
49-yard field goal attempt. Barnhart to hold. 10 seconds remaining. Here's the snap. Ball down. Kick is in the air. It's good! If you're looking for deja vu, whoa, there it is!
Final score, New Orleans 16, 49ers 13. Then on October 3rd, the Saints beat the Rams in Anaheim 37-6, followed by one of 2 bye weeks for that season. And then something seemed to happen to the Saints that they never quite recovered from. October 17th at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Former Saints defensive backs coach Dom Capers was now the defensive coordinator at the Steelers. Knowing some of the coaches from his old team, he decided to use a lot of 8-man fronts, rushing anywhere from 3 to 8 men on any given play. As a result, the Saints running game was totally shut down. The pressure was too much, as the Steelers would walk away with a 37-14 win. From a historic standpoint, some consider this the swing point in Jim Mora's Saints career. A loss to the Falcons in the Superdome would follow, and then before their second bye week, the Saints played at the Phoenix Cardinals on Halloween Day. In the 20-17 Saints victory, New Orleans native Aeneas Williams, cornerback for the Cardinals, had a fumble return and an interception run back for touchdowns. The Saints would get the ball back in the second half of the fourth quarter and gradually drive downfield, allowing for Morton Anderson's game-winning field goal. On November 14th, the Saints would host the Green Bay Packers in another defensive battle, but late in the contest, Packers quarterback Brett Favre would hit Sterling Sharp for a wide-open reception that allowed Green Bay to kick the winning field goal by Chris Jackie, 19-17. A blowout loss at the 49ers would follow on Monday Night Football, and then November 28th, a comeback win at Minnesota, featuring this at the end of the third quarter.
Bay's kickoff comes down to Tyrone Hughes from his 1. Breaking out to the right 15, turns the corner 25, 30, he's to the 40, making a move over Breeze. He makes all the way. Touchdown, Tyrone Hughes!
In the fourth quarter, Morton Anderson makes a 24-yard field goal to give the Saints a 17-14 lead. With 44 seconds left in the game, the Vikings drove downfield to try a 41-yard Fuad Reve's field goal. The attempt was good, but a flag was down, holding on Fred Strickland of the Vikings, so the second attempt is moved back for a 51-yard try. Reve's kicked the ball a little low, allowing Saints defensive tackle Jim Wilkes to block the attempt, with the Saints gaining victory. Then on December 5th, the Saints lost at the Cleveland Browns 17-13, a contest where Saints quarterback Wade Wilson was sacked 9 times to tie a then club record. 1 week later in the Superdome, the Saints were upset by the Rams 23-20 in a game where the Saints were favored by 14 points. In the latter 2/3 of the season, some noted about Wade Wilson's release getting more and more stiff. Some may have contributed that to his diabetic condition. And then December 20th, Monday Night Football in the Superdome against the New York Giants. What's remembered more about the 24-14 loss was that quarterback Wade Wilson injured his knee while attempting to throw. Some fans fans were actually cheering in the stands, to which Jim Mora let his feelings be very well known.
And tonight I saw and heard one of the most disgusting, rudest, sick demonstrations in my entire career, probably the worst. When Wade Wilson got hurt, I actually looked up in the stands and saw people standing, clapping, and cheering when he was laying on the ground with a knee injury. And I'll say this, those are some sick, sick, sick people. Mentally sick. I thought it was horrible, disgusting, embarrassing, shameful. It stunk. People are sick when they do something like that. Absolutely friggin' sick.
Wilson would not play for the rest of the season. Story goes, the next day, Saints owner Tom Benson was so upset over the comments, he made Jim Mora sign an apology letter that was photocopied to all season ticket holders, asking them not to drop their tickets because the comments were only aimed at a select few fans. Also entered in the contest was center Joel Hilgenberg. Earlier in the season, his brother Jay had started the first 5 games of the regular season, so it was naturally assumed that Jay Hilgenberg would be starting the next week at the Philadelphia Eagles. And then the Saints pulled a surprise announcement. As they stated, guard Derek Kennard would be moved over to the center position, with Chris Port at one guard spot and the other spot for Jim Dombrowski. Earlier in the year, Dombrowski had held out of training camp and preseason in order to get a new contract. Once he signed the new deal, Jim Mora elected to stay with Chris Port and Derek Kennard out of respect to them for sticking through the training camp regimen. The Saints would go on to lose that contest 37-26. In the locker room after the contest, Jay Hilgenberg told a reporter that the real reason why he didn't start was in his contract he was scheduled to make a $50,000 bonus for his 6th start. And then the Saints played their last regular season game of the 93 campaign at home against the Cincinnati Bengals on January 2nd, 1994. Jay Hilgenberg did start, with the Saints winning 20-13. Eric Martin would score the winning points early in the 4th quarter. At halftime, tight end Hobie Brenner was honored for 13 years of service to the Saints as he was in the process of retiring. Just after the season ended, Jim Wilkes also announced that he was retiring from the Saints after 13 years. Jay Hilgenberg would also leave football after the season. The Saints would miss the playoffs with a final season record of 8-8. Some argued the record would have been better if it wasn't for several injuries that occurred throughout the season, especially on defense. Linebacker Sam Mills at one point was gone for 6 weeks. Defensive lineman Frank Warren was gone with a broken leg during the second half of the year. As a result, several different linemen would rotate positions, and early on in the year, safety Brett Maxey was gone with a leg injury. The following offseason would bring even more changes, some of which would also be a little bit surprising. January 4th, 1994, Tom Benson announces general manager by committee, where Jim Mora is named head coach and vice president. His equal partners on the football side are executive vice president Jim Miller and personnel head Bill Kaharick. Some feel Benson was convinced this was the best direction to go, for it would save him money via not having to hire an outside GM. Others felt some employees suggested this over worry of getting fired if an outside GM came in. Also on this date, Jim Mora released offensive line coach Paul Boudreaux. A common theme for the Saints from 1994 to 96 seemed to be reacting to other teams' offers to free agents instead of acting first. The club often used the term declining players as a public relations way to express they weren't automatically willing to re-sign anyone, including fan favorites. Players who left in the 94 free agency period included Gene Atkins to Miami and Brett Maxey to the Falcons. Center Joe Hilgenberg was cut with the Saints working out a deal with Dolphins center Jeff Ulenake. Also signed were tight end Wesley Walls, wide receiver Michael Haynes, and linebacker Darian Connor, who was signed in late July out of concern that linebacker Joel Smingy may not be ready to replace Ricky Jackson, who remained unsigned. Later in the regular season, the Saints would sign cornerback Vinnie Clark, who had been cut by Atlanta. Linebacker Ronaldo Turnbull received a new contract paying him some $3 million a year coming off a Pro Bowl season. The Saints were actually close to signing former Steeler and Eagles quarterback Bubby Brister, where a verbal agreement was in place, but before he was scheduled to return the next day to sign, fullback Brad Mustard told the Saints that the Rams were willing to trade away quarterback Jim Everett, to which the Saints only had to give up a 7th-round draft choice. Hence, the Brister deal was canceled. In the college draft, the Saints' first-round selection was defensive end Joe Johnson from Louisville, who would go on to be a Saints Hall of Fame inductee. All business was put on hold on May 8, 1994, as Saints general manager Jim Finks had passed away from lung cancer at age 66. Here's some of Jim Mora's memories of Mr. Finks.
Jim liked to refer to people, if they were just real good football people, as a purist, and he was the purest of the purists when it came to a football guy, a football man, and I think that everybody that came in contact with him in our business had such a great deal of respect for him because of that.
On July 22nd, 2 days after training camp started, linebacker Vaughn Johnson was waived over residual issues stemming from an earlier staph infection. He would sign with the Eagles midway through the regular season. 4 days later, Jim Mora announced that the contract offer to Ricky Jackson was being withdrawn, ending Jackson's 13-year tenure with the club. Some felt it wasn't necessarily money being the issue, but friction over Jackson's comments to the press over the team's stumble in '93. City Champ would sign shortly afterwards with the 49ers, and ironically face off against former teammate Stan Brock with the Chargers in that season's Super Bowl, which the 49ers won. Another major personnel decision was made on August 28th when fan favorite Eric Martin was released. The Saints' all-time leading receiver would later sign with the Chiefs. Also in '94, the Saints created a new club-level section in the former Loge, where the Saints claimed a survey of most season ticket holders in that area were willing to pay an extra $100 per seat in return for added features. The Saints refused to release the survey, and later it was discovered most of the renovations were installed within 4 weeks of the first preseason home game. And according to TV interviews with fans on opening day, reviews were mixed at best. September 4th, opening day, a home contest against the Kansas City Chiefs. The late Jim Finks was honored at halftime by being inducted into the Superdome Wall of Fame. The Saints would go on to lose the contest 30-17 and then lose the next week to the Washington Redskins in the Dome, largely because of special teams errors. A little bit of trivia from this contest: first Saints player to score a two-point conversion in the regular season, wide receiver Torrance Small. The Saints would go on to start the season 2-5 before one of the wackier games in club history occurred on October 23rd, a home game against the Los Angeles Rams. 4 90-plus yard touchdowns were scored in the contest, including a couple by star kick returner Tyrone Hughes.
Here's Sendejas' kickoff. Tyrone Hughes from his own 9-yard line up to the 20, running to the far side. There's the seed. He's up to the 40. 2 men to beat. He's to the 40 of the Rams. 30, cuts it back. Still running. 10, 5, touchdown, State! 92 yards for Tyrone Hughes. Here's Sendejas' kickoff. Tyrone Hughes from his own 3-yard line, straight ahead 10, 15, far sideline 20, up to the 30, up to the 40, and he's got Sendejas to beat. He may be going again. Tie on the fly. The daily double, folks. That's another touchdown and a kickoff return by Tyrone Hughes. 98 yards. Can you believe it?
The 2 long TDs by the Rams came in controversial fashion. In the second quarter, defensive back Toby Wright picked up a Lorenzo Neal fumble and ran it back 98 yards for a touchdown. Later, it was discovered by a sideline camera that Neal's knee was down by contact before the ball came out. Then in the fourth quarter, when Rams' Robert Bailey ran back a 103-yard punt return for a touchdown, Wesley Walls and other Saints players swore to head coach Jim Mora that one of the officials in the end zone blew the play dead, and there was probably some evidence to that case because both the Rams offense and the Saints defense were coming out on the field, which only added further controversy because if it was a valid score, both teams should have been penalized for too many men on the field. Tyrone Hughes would finish this game with an incredible 304 kick return yards and add another 43 punt return yards. Final score, New Orleans 37, Rams 34. The next week at Minnesota, a heartbreaking loss as quarterback Warren Moon for the Vikings would throw a late touchdown pass.
Warren Moon. The Vikings have the lead.
Final score, Minnesota 21, Saints 20. A week later, back in the Superdome to play the Falcons. The Saints were down 17-0 in the first quarter before they would slowly come back and make it a very competitive game by the end of the third quarter. The Saints would get the ball back near the end and gradually drive in the range for Morton Anderson's game-winning field goal.
Everett down the middle. Caught by Torrance Small. Down to the 35. Clock running down to 30 seconds. Here comes a blitz. Caught by Erling. Close to the 20. Anderson, 39-yard field goal attempt. As you look at the ball being played down here, Morton Anderson drilling the field goal.
Final score, New Orleans 33, Falcons 32. A loss that the Raiders would follow, and then on Monday Night Football at home against the 49ers, it was Ricky Jackson's return to the Superdome, just donning another uniform. The game stayed very competitive in the first half, largely thanks to the Saints defense, as Tyrone Hughes would pick up a fumble and run it back 86 yards for a touchdown. But the 49ers would blow it away in the second half, final score 35-14. Story goes when the game was over, head coach Jim Mora called all of his defensive players to go in one wing of the locker room, where according to one report, literally chewed out every single defensive player and coach on the squad. It caused some friction that would result in some changes at season's end. 2 wins would follow at the Los Angeles Rams and at the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday Night Football, December 11th, and then a tough Monday night loss to the Dallas Cowboys in the Superdome, 24-16. However, the season would close out at the Denver Broncos, another squeaker of a win, 30-28. In the contest, wide receiver Torrance Small would have 200 receiving yards, the second most in Saints history for one game, the record at the time going to Wes Chandler, who had 205 receiving yards on opening day in 1979 against Atlanta. Tyrone Hughes would finish the season with 1,556 kick return yards and 143 punt return yards. Defensive end Wayne Martin would have 10 sacks, linebacker Darian Connor 10.5, and the club would end the season at 7-9. The 1995 Saints calendar year started on a very interesting note in early January as head coach Jim Mora released defensive coordinator Steve Sidwell and defensive line coach John Pease. Mora felt there was a decline in the overall defense, especially in the latter half of '94, and as a result he hired Monty Kiffin to be the new defensive coordinator. On January 26th, the Saints training facilities on David Drive in Metairie suffered severe damage from a fire that was traced back to a heating element in a hot tub being left on overnight. The team would use temporary trailers until a new facility would be built about a year later. And then free agency would begin, and on March the 9th, longtime Saints fan favorite Sam Mills would leave to go to the Carolina Panthers to be reunited with their new head coach, former Saints defensive backs coach Dom Capers. Linebacker Darian Connor would also go to Carolina. Defensive back Vinnie Clark would go to Jacksonville. It's these three players that Jim Mora stated to the press in January of '95 that he wanted to sign back the most. On March the 20th, Frank Warren, longtime defensive end from 1981 to '94, announced his formal retirement. Then on April 22nd, the college draft was held. The Saints in the first round selected linebacker Mark Fields, recognized as one of the fastest linebackers in the National Football League for the second half of the '90s and the early 2000s. The Saints' most noteworthy signing in the 1995 free agency period was cornerback Eric Allen from the Philadelphia Eagles. He had signed a 10-year offer with the Saints around March 19th, and then a week later, the Eagles formally announced that they would not match the Saints' offer. Likely the hardest news to take for Saints fans was on July 19th, the day before training camp start, as Morton Anderson was released. As it was reported by some media outlets, Anderson was told the day before if he did not take a 50% pay cut, he would no longer be with the team. The Saints told the press they still felt they had a good chance of signing Morton once again, but instead, less than 24 hours later, he signed with the Atlanta Falcons, who agreed to let go longtime veteran kicker Norm Johnson. Here's an interview with Morton Anderson at the airport right after signing with Atlanta.
Well, I'm a little bit in shock, but and it has happened very quickly. The last 48 hours have probably been, the most eventful hours of my life, and the biggest changes have happened as far as my career. It's sad in one sense because I've spent 13 years, all of my career with one organization, and I'm certainly thankful for that. And I want the people in New Orleans to know that I am very thankful, and I will miss them, and they've been great to me.
And here's Jim Mora's comments after Morton's departure.
Morton had an awesome, outstanding, great career with the New Orleans Saints. Helped the Saints win a lot of games, was a great member of this team, was a very team-oriented guy. I consider him a good friend, and I wish him all the luck in the world.
Later on in training camp, the Saints would sign former Redskins kicker Chip Lowmiller, who would eventually win the starting role in '95 over Kerry Blanchard. The 1995 Saints regular season started off on an 0-5 note, though they were competitive in 4 out of those 5 losses. Probably the most distinct loss was Game 3 in the Superdome, ironically against Morton Anderson and his new team, the Atlanta Falcons. The game would eventually go to overtime, and then late in the contest, the Falcons would get the ball back, and after a long reception from Jeff George to Eric Metcalf, Morton Anderson would come out to kick the game-winning field goal.
And what incredible irony. With a 21-yard field goal to win the game 6 times in the uniform of the New Orleans Saints, he beat the Atlanta Falcons. Maybe now turnabout is fair play. Morton Anderson has just won the game for the Atlanta Falcons. Coming back home after 13 years in a New Orleans uniform, Morton Anderson's game-winning field goal just did in his old coach, Jim Mora.
Final score, Atlanta 27, New Orleans 24. This contest would be the first of 10 in a row that Atlanta would win over New Orleans. Some national media outlets reported after the fifth loss that Saints owner Tom Benson tried to contact former Cowboys head coach Jimmy Johnson about coming immediately over to the Saints and taking over as head coach. When Johnson replied to Tom Benson, he told him no, he would not accept the job out of respect to Jim Mora, who had been way too loyal to Mr. Benson for too many years. Johnson further stated to Benson that if a change needed to be made, that he should wait and do so at the end of the season. Once Jim Mora got wind of the story, some felt that this was the gradual eroding of the professional relationship between him and Tom Benson. The Saints would finally win after a bye week on October 15th over the Miami Dolphins, 33-30, only to lose the next week at Carolina, 20-3. And then the Saints would gather more momentum for the rest of the season. On October 29th at San Francisco, they would squeak out a defensive struggle 11-7 because of continued struggling play by kicker Chip Lowmiller. He would be released after the game and replaced 2 days later with former 49ers kicker Doug Bryan. Bryan would end up making 4 field goals in his first Saints regular season contest, a home game on November the 5th over the St. Louis Rams, 19-10. The next week, a squeaker of a game once again against the Indianapolis Colts in the Superdome. Final score 17-14 as former Saints kicker Kerry Blanchard would miss the tying field goal wide left with under a minute to go. A blowout loss the next week at Minnesota would follow, and then an 8-point victory at home on Sunday Night Football over Carolina, and then a 31-17 win at New England. A defeat would follow at Atlanta, 19-14, in which Jim Everett was intercepted very late in the contest. A shellacking by the Packers would come the following Saturday, and then a 12-0 victory over the Jets to close out the season 7-9. Some interesting season stats include quarterback Jim Everett with 3,970 passing yards, Tyronn Hughes had 1,617 kick return yards, and defensive lineman Wayne Martin with 13 sacks. The offseason leading into 1996 would definitely be interesting. On January 13th, Tom Benson holds a press conference announcing that Bill Kuharich is elevated to full general manager, ending the 2 years of the GM by committee format. Jim Mora is promoted to vice president as well as head coach. Later in January, Monty Kiffin resigns as defensive coordinator to take the same position with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Afterwards, the Saints promote Jim Haslett to defensive coordinator, had been the linebackers coach the previous year. In free agency, wide receiver Quinn Early leaves to go to the Bills, Richard Cooper, offensive tackle, to the Eagles. Some noteworthy signings by the Saints in the same free agency period included defensive back Mark McMillan from the Philadelphia Eagles and Greg Jackson from the Giants. And fan favorite safety Vince Buck was released on June 26. On May the 9th, the Saints dedicated their brand new facility. It was the first time in club history that all of their operations were going to be located at one site. Just a few days before the move, Vice President Jim Miller was fired. In an interview after the dismissal, he stated, Tom Benson told him, quote, "You think too much like Jim thinks," close quote. Some felt Tom Benson wanted to run the team more like a business than a football organization. The Saints started the 1996 regular season 0-5, though these losses weren't quite as close as they were the previous year. The club would briefly turn things around on October 6 in a home game against Jacksonville, 17-13. With 1:45 left in the game, Jim Everett hits this 6-yard touchdown pass.
First and goal at the 6. Plenty of time. Touchdown! Horace Small.
The Jaguars tried to come back late in the contest, but a couple of Hail Marys fell short. The following week, also at home against the Chicago Bears, in a contest where Saints fullback Ray Zellers had 174 rushing yards and 1 touchdown, it stayed close down to the wire, tied at 24 when Doug Bryan was called out to take the lead.
They're going to mark it at a 54-yarder. This would be a career long for Bryan. Got a good kick into it. It's good. Doug Bryan gives the Saints the lead with 1:44 remaining.
On the ensuing drive, the Saints defense would step up.
3rd and 6. Craig hit by Stokes and he fumbles it. Saints pick it up and taken down at the bridge. Dixon comes up with a Stokes after Stokes leveled Craig.
Final score, Saints 27, Bears 24. And then 1 week later at the Carolina Panthers, a 19-7 loss. Jim Mora was so frustrated that after the game, he didn't mix words.
We couldn't do diddly poo offensively. The second half, we couldn't stop the run. Every time they got the ball, they went down and got points. We got our totally kicked in the second half. I'm totally embarrassed and totally ashamed. Coaching did a horrible job. The players did a horrible job. I couldn't be more upset.
It was apparent the frustration of 10.5 seasons and not being able to continue as a winning team would lead Jim Ord to resign the next day.
I have decided to resign today as head coach of the New Orleans Saints. I would like to say I have thoroughly enjoyed the 10.5 years I have spent with this organization, and I've been very fortunate and very blessed to work with some outstanding people, coaches, and players. I would also like to thank the New Orleans Saints fans for their support. This also has meant a great deal to me and my family. I would encourage everyone to continue to support this team and this organization.
Story goes the following day, on the 22nd of October, General Manager Bill Kaharick was ready to hire Chet Franklin from the personnel department as the head coach. However, internal strife within the organization, especially amongst the assistant coaches, led to that being scrapped. However, Kaharick did call an announcement that offensive coordinator Carl Smith had been relieved of his duties. There were mixed reviews on that decision. Some felt that maybe he was let go because he was not doing a good job, while others felt it was more a public relations move since Carl Smith was the subject of a lot of public criticism. So on October 23rd, Rick Venturi, linebackers coach, was named the interim head coach.
I'm so proud of the players, the coaches, really everybody in the operation, and I'm so happy for them, really, for staying the course, for hanging in there. Professional sports, when you go through these hard times, it's as tough as it gets, and I'm just so proud of their effort to never have lost it and to keep playing every week and finally to get some positive results.
Venturi would go 1-7 in his Saints tenure, the only win on December 15th at the New York Giants, 17-3. One special footnote: at the end of the 96 season, longtime Saints strength and conditioning coach Russell Paternostro elected to retire to go into other business avenues. And here's another Saints timeout. January 26, 1997 featured the gathering of 72,301 fans into the Louisiana Superdome for Super Bowl 31 between the New England Patriots, led by head coach Bill Parcells with an 11-5 regular season mark, and the Green Bay Packers, led by Mike Holmgren with a 13-3 record. The game was kept close in the first quarter. Then the Packers started the separation with 17 unanswered second quarter points.
There's Favre. Antonio Freeman. They're not going to catch him. Touchdown, Green Bay, as the Packers recapture the lead. No blitz this time. A pass intercepted by Mike Pryor. Pryor stays on his feet. Pryor gets the Packers back to the 26. On the 2, first and goal. Here's Favre.
One official said he did get in.
Yes, he thinks he did.
And it looked like the ball was inside the pylon and did break the plane.
New England tried to catch up in the third quarter,
but Curtis Martin is in the end zone. Martin broke through the middle.
But one play later, that changed, as for the first time in Super Bowl history, the MVP award went to primarily a special teams player in Green Bay's Desmond Howard. He had 154 kickoff return yards, including this 99-yard run back for a TD.
Kick goes to Desmond Howard at the 1. Desmond Howard is off. You better turn it on or he's gone. Desmond Howard all the way into the Patriot end zone, 99 yards.
Howard would have another 90 punt return yards, setting a Super Bowl record in combined net yards gained at 244. Patriots' Drew Bledsoe threw 4 interceptions, and Packers defensive end Reggie White set a then Super Bowl record with 3 sacks.
There's Bledsoe. Down he goes.
And there's Reggie White. And that's that hump move. That's the one. He learned that from Howie Long. Reggie White's going to take over this game right now.
Green Bay won 35-21. The rebuilding of the Saints for 1997 began on January 28th when Mike Ditka was named head coach. Here's the ironic words he started his first press conference with.
I thought this would be real easy, but it's not. Life to me is about challenges and climbing mountains, and that's what I intend to do, try to climb another mountain.
He later stated if he couldn't bring the Saints to the playoffs by the end of his third season, then he didn't deserve to be the coach here. He would bring in fan favorite wide receiver Danny Abramowitz to be the new offensive coordinator. The two had worked together for 1 year in Chicago, and Zaven Yularian was named defensive coordinator. And his side of the ball accumulated 59 sacks in 1997. Offensive woes continued to haunt the Saints. Be it play calling issues or ball handling problems, the club would set a record with 55 turnovers. Approximately half of the roster would turn over going into this campaign, and for the first time in Saints history, they would start the regular season in the month of August 31st at the St. Louis Rams. And while the Saints would lose that contest by 14, return man Eric Gulliford would score a 102-yard kickoff return for touchdown.
Gulliford from the end zone. Fake reverse. Gulliford. Only the kicker in his way. Eric Gulliford in the open field, and Gulliford will travel into the end zone.
Game 2 at home against the San Diego Chargers in a 20-6 loss, ironically, had former Saints quarterback Jim Everett starting for San Diego, and of course the Saints had acquired Heath Schuler in the offseason in return for a 3rd and 5th round draft choice to the Redskins. A great example of Ditka's impulsive moves, he had made a bet with a member of Saints personnel for $50 that Danny Werfel would be picked in the top 100 selections of the draft. Analysts had Werfel going in the 7th round, and to no surprise, Ditka selected Werfel early in the 4th round. And then going into his old homestead of Chicago, the Saints were 1-4. New Orleans would squeak out a 20-17 win thanks to this long Mario Bates run.
Here's the handoff, and Bates with a quick hold. Now the chase is on. Mangum runs after him. No flags, touchdown New Orleans. I think he's out of the doghouse.
And near game's end, Heath Schuler on a long pass where he actually had his eyes closed.
Fontenot to center. Schuler, deep left side. Got it! Randall Hill in a foot race. Hill, 89-yard touchdown strike. That's an excellent job by a wide receiver. Stay with the football no matter what.
Another example of the club's offensive woes was on October 12th at home against the Falcons. While the Saints defense accumulated 5 sacks, the Falcons defense would get quarterbacks Heath Schuler and Danny Werfel a total of 10 times behind the line. The Saints would lose that contest 23-17. On October 19th, the Saints would lose to Carolina 13-0, ending a 216-game regular season streak of not allowing a shutout. Ironically, the next week, and for the first time in Saints history, they would be shut out back-to-back, this time to San Francisco 23-0. Things would start to turn around a little bit on November 9th with a 13-10 victory over Oakland, thanks to a Doug Bryant 44-yard field goal with 2:55 left. And then when the Raiders tried to come back, Saints safety Sammy Knight would intercept the ball to clinch the victory. 1 week later at home in a wacky game against the Seahawks, the Saints would turn over the ball 5 times, Seattle 4 times. It wound up setting a then NFL record for fewest seconds elapsed in the extra period at 17. Here are the 2 plays that gave the Saints the 20-17 victory.
Saints defense playing a very strong game. They gave up that one big play. Moved to James McKnight, the inside touchdown. Oh, under pressure, he's hit, intercepted. Tubbs has it. Winford Tubbs dives down to the 22. Mark Fields hit Moon, and Tubbs comes up with a pick. Doug Bryant coming on for the field goal, a 38-yarder. Saints win in overtime.
A few days later, Ditka brought in quarterback Billy Joe Hobart after Heath Schuler was gone for the year with a turf toe. Story goes that Ditka was so frustrated with his quarterback position among Schuler, Werfel, and Doug Nussmeier that when Hobart came in to try out for the Saints, Ditka actually walked out on the tryout telling a staff member, if you think he's any good, sign him. After the November 23rd loss at Atlanta 20-3, Mike Ditka had some very interesting and frustrating comments.
I'm probably the wrong guy for this job, I'll say that. Probably better off getting somebody else.
One day later, he would retract those comments. Then on November 30th at the Carolina Panthers, with Billy Joe Hobart starting, the Saints would walk away with a 16-13 win thanks to a Doug Bryant 45-yard field goal with 5 seconds left. The key play on that drive was a Billy Joe Hobart to Randall Hill pass play. The Saints would finish the campaign 6-10. Upon season's conclusion, running backs coach Tom Moore would lead the Saints to become the offensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts. Many had given credit to Tom Moore for helping the Saints in their first victory of the year against the Lions, since he was formerly Detroit's offensive coordinator. February 15, 1998, linebacker Winfred Tubbs signs with the 49ers after setting a Saints season record with 160 total tackles. Story goes Saints offered him a 4-year, $10 million deal, but refused to have the last year invalidated if he went to the Pro Bowl. 49ers end up giving him a 5-year, $14 million deal with said Pro Bowl clause. Tight end Irv Smith also went to the 49ers. After retooling, it was time for opening day, September 6, once again at the St. Louis Rams, a contest the Saints would win 24-17. However, starting quarterback Billy Joe Hobart was lost for the season with an Achilles tendon injury. The contest included this defensive touchdown.
First down and 10. Banks will give to Moore. The ball is out. This one is a fumble. It's picked up. This is a touchdown for Joe Johnson.
Great pressure inside again by defensive tackle Leroy Glover, who beat the backside scoop block with quickness.
The Defensive end Joe Johnson also started the season with a new 5-year, $22 million contract. A few days later, the club would sign quarterback Billy Joe Tolliver to fill Holbert's roster spot. The Saints started 3-0, including a 1913 win at Indianapolis, led by former Saints head coach Jim Mora. Ironically, two one-time Saints interim head coaches were working for Mike Ditka, Rick Venturi, and Dick Stanfill. With just under 3 minutes left in regulation, a Colts punt would pin the Saints down at their own 4-yard line, where quarterback Danny Werfel had to come back and lead the tying charge.
Werfel, he's going deep, he's got a man open, and it is caught by John Dawkins. What a huge play to keep this thing alive. Picks up 44 yards on 4th and 17. Werfel into the end zone. They're battling for it, and it is caught, and it is a touchdown for Andre Hastings.
In overtime, Saints cornerback Tyrone Drakeford makes the key play.
First down and 10. Peyton Manning from the 44-yard line. 3 wide receivers in the game. Looking outside. This will be picked off. Tyrone Drakeford takes it the other way, make it the 36-yard line. What a huge play.
Shortly afterwards, quarterback Danny Werfel hits the winning touchdown pass.
Bootleg from Werfel. He's got his tight end wide open. Cleveland past the 20. He'll go into the end zone. Touchdown. This one's over. No flags. New Orleans will win 19-13.
On October 4th, the Saints would lose their first game of the season at home versus the Patriots. Each team would score a defensive touchdown. Saints kicker Doug Bryant ties the game at 27, thanks to yardage acquired by this Andre Hastings punt return.
High snap handled by Tufa. The bounce inside the 5. Volley ball to the goal line. They pick it up. It's a live ball.
Live ball.
Picked up by reserve wide receiver Andre Hastings. Hastings still in bounds and knocked out at the 25. What an improbable, unconscionable play this late in the game.
The play started on an odd note as Saints player Earl Little tried to kneel on the ball in the end zone when Hastings took the ball from him and ran it down the sidelines. However, with under 2 minutes left, Patriots quarterback Drew Bledsoe slowly drove into field goal range with Adam Vinatieri hitting the winning 27-yarder. Some season highlights included defensive tackle Roy Glover getting 10 sacks. The Saints defense overall scored 9 touchdowns. Sammy Knight, who joined the Saints as an undrafted free agent a year earlier, had 2 touchdowns along with 6 interceptions. One of those TDs came in a loss at the Vikings for 91 yards.
3rd and 3. That's Carter in motion. And the quick toss is done away and intercepted. Sammy Knight may go all the way. The Vikings trying to catch him. Touchdown Saints. Second interception of the game for Sammy Knight.
In that contest, Saints running back Aaron Craver was credited with a 100-yard kickoff return touchdown where he was actually touched down early in the run, but the officials missed the call. On October 14th, the Saints try and boost a struggling quarterback position where Mike Ditka claims Kerry Collins off of waivers from the Panthers after Collins was cut over what some felt was off-field issues. One day earlier on radio, general manager Bill Kaharick stated that he had no interest in the Saints signing Collins. Collins would be in and out of the lineup for the rest of the season, but notably on December 6th at home versus Dallas in a 22-3 win, Collins would tie a then Saints record with this touchdown pass.
Collins going deep. Hastings is going to take it all the way. Gary Collins threw a strike, 89 yards.
That's what the Cowboys were worried about. Kevin Mathis out there playing with a cast on his arm. Andre Hastings gets by him.
2 days later, fullback Ray Zellers is waived over disciplinary issues between him and Mike Ditka. Zellers was suspended for 1 game in '96 under Jim Mora. The Saints would fall to 6-8 after 14 games and yet controlled their own destiny into the postseason. The key game was December 20th at Arizona. The back-and-forth contest had the Saints taking a 17-16 lead with 1:27 left in the contest.
3rd and 12. Collins has some time. Touchdown. Cameron Cleland, the rookie tight end. And the Saints are in the lead. Great effort, great drive by the Saints and Kerry Collins.
On the ensuing drive, Cardinals quarterback Jake Plummer would have 2 long runs to help set up the winning field goal.
Jackie up and good. Officially 36 yards for Chris Jackie. The former Packer zeros are up.
The Saints would be eliminated from playoff contention and finish the season once again at 6-10. Mike Ditka in 1999 made things interesting. He had previously cut his leading receivers in back-to-back seasons, first Randall Hill over showboating, then Sean Dawkins over a lack of downfield blocking. He became the first Saints head coach to win 2 consecutive season openers. By mid-October '99, his frustration led him to overriding offensive coordinator Danny Abramowitz's play-calling duties, and it was reported defensive coordinator Zaven Yularian was frustrated because he felt Ditka had some players out of position. The Saints fined Ditka $20,000 for grabbing part of his anatomy, in front of critical fans on the way to the locker room after a loss to Tennessee. At halftime of a 31-3 loss at the Giants, he stated after New York completed a Big Ben pass, quote, "We're the elixir of the league," close quote, in making other teams better. After trading a second-round pick to the Rams for wide receiver Eddie Kennison, Ditka gave up the remaining Saints 1999 draft, plus a first and third-round pick in 2000 in return for the Redskins' 5th overall pick to select Heisman Trophy winner running back Ricky Williams, who would later be known that season for not taking his helmet off during interviews after practice. Williams would be injured on opening day in a 19-10 Saints home win over Carolina and would miss playing time throughout the season.
Doug Bryan puts his foot into the football, and the 99 season is underway. This is Bates from the 6 across the 10, 15, 20. Ball comes free, lying on the carpet, picked up by the Saints. They're going to take it in for the touchdown. Tyrone Drakeford picks up the loose ball, and on the very first play of this game, the Saints have a score, a 14-yard return of the Bates fumble.
Well, that's one hell of a way to start a season, Jim.
Drakeford's fumble recovery for touchdown set an NFL opening day record with fewest seconds elapsed before first score, 12 seconds. The next week at San Francisco, the Saints had a 21-14 lead in the fourth quarter before the 49ers tied the game. Then with 1:46 to go, defensive back Lance Schulters runs back a 64-yard interception for the game-winning touchdown, 28-21 49ers. Then at Chicago with 2 minutes to go, the Saints gave up a 10-0 lead via 2 touchdown passes from Shane Matthews to Curtis Conway, 14-10 Bears. The main highlight a week later in a 20-17 loss versus the Falcons was this, the longest touchdown pass in Saints history.
Billy Joe Holder downfield, pass underthrown, but still caught. Eddie Kennison, 90 yards for the touchdown. It starts with protection up front, and Ray Buchanan, who was in the Pro Bowl last year with 7 interceptions and has been beaten now 3 weeks in a row for a long touchdown.
It would get worse in the Superdome on Halloween Day. Despite Ricky Williams setting a club record with 40 carries, plus the Saints having the ball for 40 minutes and 50 seconds, they had to come back with a Doug Bryan field goal with under 30 seconds to go for a 16-14 lead. The Browns would still have time left for an unbelievable finish.
1 chance left, 2 seconds. Out, long high ball, lots of guys going for it. Fighting the end zone, it's tied by the Browns! The Cleveland Browns have won the game on a 56-yard pass. And the legends are built on plays like that. I've seen everything.
This is unbelievable. What more can go wrong for the New Orleans Saints?
Wow. The look on Mike Victor's face about says it all.
Browns wide receiver Kevin Johnson was able to catch the deflected pass because Saints cornerback Tyrone Drakeford was late on the play and inadvertently deflected the ball upward after safety Sammy Knight tried to knock it down. The Saints would stumble to 2-12 when on Christmas Eve, quarterback Jake Delhomme, who was cut in preseason and re-signed in late November, got his first NFL start and would lead the club to a 31-24 victory that included touchdown passes to Keith Poole and Eddie Kennison, plus Delhomme rushing in another, but the struggling defense stepped up.
2nd and 10 from the New Orleans 42. Aikman, play action, looks, throws underneath to Smith. Emmett Smith wrapped up and the ball comes free. Picked up by Weary. There goes Fred Weary. Only Aikman to beat. Weary's going to go down the far sideline. Touchdown, New Orleans. A 58-yard return, and the Saints are back in control in a jubilant Louisiana Superdome.
And later, Mark Fields would make the saving interception on the Cowboys' last offensive drive.
From the New Orleans 6-yard line, Aikman drops, looks, pumps, throws over the middle, incomplete. In fact, it may be intercepted. It went out of the hands of LaFleur. Keith Mitchell jarred the ball free, and it went right into the hands of Mark Fields in the end zone. With 1 minute and 4 seconds left, it looks like the Saints are going to win this thing and score a major upset.
Story goes, Saints owner Tom Benson was ready to bring back Ditka for the 2000 season, going into the club's final game on January 2nd at Carolina. But when the club lost 45-13, Benson would fire Mike Ditka, general manager Bill Kaharick, and some 19 other front office employees 3 days later in one of the biggest house cleanings in club history. And now here's our list, some of the better Saints players for the decade of the 90s. Quarterback, Jim Everett. Running backs, Dalton Hilliard and Mario Bates. Fullback, Lorenzo Neal. Wide receivers, Quinn Early and Michael Haynes. Tight end, Wesley Walls. Offensive tackles, William Rofe and Richard Cooper. Guards, Jim Dombrowski and Chris Port. Center, Joel Hilgenberg. Defensive ends, Joe Johnson and Brady Smith. Defensive tackles, Leroy Glover and Wayne Martin. Linebackers, Mark Fields, Vaughn Johnson, Winfred Tubbs, and Ronaldo Turnbull. Cornerbacks, Vince Buck and Jimmy Spencer. Safeties, Gene Atkins and Sammy Knight. Kicker, Doug Bryant. Punter, Mark Royals, who also serves as our holder. Return specialist, Tyrone Hughes. Special teams coverage, J.J. McCleskey, and deep snapper, Kendall Gammon.